Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
A business trip to a neighboring town was very difficult. Cindy, a young pharmacist, was sent to help receive goods. The new pharmacy was about to open, and there was a shortage of manpower. The employees worked from morning until late at night, always on their feet. By the end of the third day in the girl's head, there seemed to be nothing but the names of drugs, dates, expiration dates. Some boss from the regional supplementary. I wanted the opening of the pharmacy was held exactly on the day of the pharmacy worker on May 19. And the fact that it is impossible to process such a huge assortment in a short time, no one cared. Despite the difficulties, the work was finished earlier than planned, and all the business travelers were sent home. What a surprise it will be to the sailor, the girl thought, sitting on the train. He is expecting me on Monday, and I on Sunday. Tired but happy Cindy, anticipating a quick meeting with her lover, she opened the apartment with the key and entered the hallway. Yes, that's it. Do you understand me now? She's such a snake pretending to be, kindly, a stepping stone. But I know they don't hire just anybody at the drugstore. And no one knows what chickens are for us. What do we die of? She loves Mark, but she's afraid to cuddle with him. Not to sit with a man and cuddle. She's always going around, wiping, cleaning. How does she find things to wash 15 times? I only have time to pay the light bill. Even on her day off, she finds something to do. I don't know how to get her out of the house. It's impossible to talk to my son face to face. She's always cooking and learning. She's funny, for God's sake. Her apple pies are all a mess. I eat them. Yeah, I praise them. They didn't teach them how to cook at the orphanage. But I still keep an eye on her. They're so resentful of life, they can do anything. Cindy froze in horror. She could clearly hear her future mother-in-law. Sophia was talking about her to someone on the phone. Yeah, I don't know what to do. That asshole doesn't want to get married either. I thought he'd really listen to me. He came home last night at 2 o'clock in the morning with booze on his breath. He tried to sneak some girl into the apartment. I'd have given him a hard time. Yeah, the neighbors might have heard us talking, you know what I mean. In the morning, I told him to marry her. And he says, no, I won't. I'm sick of her. I tell him why she's bothering you. All morning and night, and he's super decent. You don't have to think about it. You have to act. My dear, she'll be back from her business trip the day after tomorrow. I'll give her some mushrooms. She likes my mushrooms. Oh, she loves mushrooms. With potatoes. No, why poison this case? It's a criminal case. I'm an idiot. What a fool I've made her do. And then she'll slowly move on her own. The main thing is that we all sit at the table together, so that no suspicions arise. I'll put some mushrooms in my plate for Mark and myself, but not the normal ones. Cindy couldn't believe her ears. Mushrooms, yes, she loves them, but they want to poison her. Cindy, barely audible and almost out of breath, opened the door, carefully set her bag of belongings out and paid her back. She did everything so quietly that she herself couldn't believe how she had managed it. Her heart was pounding frantically, and her legs were unsteady. Only when she jumped out of the driveway did she finally get her breath back, and with a quick step, holding her heavy bag, she hurried away from the house. Cindy walked 2 blocks before she gave herself a break. She sat down on the nearest bench and cried. Was this happening to her for real, or was it a dream? Mark tried to bring some girl home, not shy of her mother, and Sophia wants to poison her. For what? For trying to be a good wife and mom from morning till night. Things just don't work out. Is it because the orphanages are afraid that I'll be left without an apartment? I have my own apartment. I moved in with his mom for Mark. He's the one who has to work. I'm not the one who's too lazy to get up early. If you told him you don't like him, you'd have left. How come? Last week he called me his wife, and this week he's dragging women home without remorse. And his mother is so strange, she's talking about marriage, she won't shut her mouth. And now she wants to poison him. But no matter how hard Cindy tried to find an explanation for everything she heard, nothing worked. In their 7 months together, Mark had never once seriously offended or humiliated Cindy. Yes, she had noticed that lately he had been very glum. But a man can't always be positive. He's got a tough job. He's a warehouse laborer for a big retail chain. And anyway, is family life always cloudless? Here the educators always told her to study, work, meet a serious man, be patient, do not have illusions. But these are all general phrases. And what kind of life can be, what should it be, when you meet such a person? No one along the line said. And sometimes Mark's strange behavior she took for granted. The girl had to endure a lot of things in the orphanage mockery of peers and older guys, when they called her gypsy for too rough appearance, indifference of others who did not give these childish pranks them a special meaning. But that was not what was most unbearable. The hardest thing was to get rid of the constant hope that she would someday be taken away from here, and she would not tell. The same verse for the 7th time. The woman would smile at her and show her what she could do. She would not be given a pretty dress. She would not be calmed. To give instructions to behave well and to be liked by someone. These girls are active and inquisitive by nature. I wanted to behave naturally, maybe somewhere to fool around, somewhere to laugh, but she was always told to behave decently, or they will think that you are a gypsy and no one will take you. Cindy did not rebel, but against the restrictions. She tried. She tried hard. She told poems well and counted examples. But for some reason, the girls were always taken by the others, the bright-eyed ones. It was a long time before she stopped living in a waiting mode. But the bitter realization that nothing would change still occasionally overtook her soul. One way or another, Cindy had learned, not without the help of outsiders. One must rely only on oneself. 3 years of arduous medical school studies passed. Cindy got a job in a pharmacy, a living, some kind of security. All this time she lived in a small apartment, received from the state. And now, it would seem, live as you wish. You are a free man now. But the girl remembered the director's stories about the fate of children from orphanages. The freedom that had fallen on their heads like a snowball. Not everyone could appreciate it. Some of them had made a brothel out of their housing, and some had lost it altogether, having taken the word of the swindlers that by selling the apartment in 5 years, under a special scheme they could buy twice as much housing. Cindy showed good results in her studies, and apparently that is why many teachers and staff of the orphanage often instructed the girl on the way to the truth. They warned her against such cases. But it is impossible to live always according to one scheme, constantly beware of everything. There are periods in life when you just unbearably want warmth and tenderness. And then there comes a time when you want to give this tenderness to someone and share your homeless, not once lost stock of feelings and emotions. It so happened that when Cindy seriously thought about starting a family, she met Mark by chance and quickly decided that he was her destiny. At the beginning of their life together, they were doing very well and complemented each other like yin and yang. Reserved Cindy and cheerful and versatile Mark, blonde-haired and blue-eyed. But even not the appearance immediately conquered the girl. Already on the 2nd date, Mark said that when they have children, he will love them very much and give them all his free time. After these words, Cindy, it seemed, did not need to say anything, still growing up without parental affection. She considered it a sign from above, and without hesitation, agreed to the guy's proposal to live together. Mark was not a mama's boy, but some things in their home Cindy could not understand. Sophia sometimes treated the 25-year-old guy like a child. She would pour tea for him, or bake pancakes for him early in the morning. The girl understood that it was pointless to compete with Sophia, but she seriously imagined herself as Mark's wife and tried to be caring and economic, as if she deserved the love of such a handsome man as Mark and winning the favor of his mother. One day, coming home after a hard shift at work, the girl sat down on the couch and just could not get up. Her legs were unbearably buzzing. Foolishly, she put on almost new and impossible shoes. Looking into the room, Sophia remarked caustically that the young wife could have been more careful. Dinner wasn't ready. Clothes couldn't wife. Trying to get up, Cindy toppled back onto the couch in surprise. Mark brought a basin of warm water and carefully and gently placed her feet in the water. Other than that, he forbade Cindy to get up from the couch until she rested. Here are girls dreaming of unearthly love, seething passionate emotions. Yes, it's nothing compared to the care of a loved one when you can't stand on your feet. And then everything falls into place again, and Mark no longer seems so cold and soulless. It's not the words that matter, it's the deeds. And the fact that he sits and plays computer games all evening is not such a great crime. No, Cindy was not the kind of person who is constantly shown in Russian movies on home TV. They are the kind of women who accept the blows of fate without complaint and somehow magically find happiness. It's just that the girl really wanted to find something she never had. And she was sure that patience and labor would bear fruit. The laughter of teenagers near the entrance interrupted Cindy's thoughts. She had been sitting on the bench for half an hour and couldn't think of what to do. The anxiety was gradually receding. The evening was warm, with an unobtrusive breeze blowing in her face. And yet everything was fine. Thank God they let me go early. How it would have ended if I don't even want to think about it. The girl wanted to get up, but suddenly the phone rang. It was Maria. Hi, Cindy. What are you doing home? Hi, I got home okay. I apologize for calling me so late. You know, I really need your help. What's up? Tell me what I can do. I will. You remember Sam? I told you about him. He's leaving for Dubai tomorrow, and he wants me to come with him. And Anna wouldn't let me do it on my own dime. She said in case Cindy asks for time off after the business trip. And there's no one to work. Wendy's not feeling well. I wish she hadn't gone on sick leave. You want me to work for you? Yeah, you heard me right. I really need to be with him. On this vacation, I've already bought 3 bathing suits and 4 dresses. You may think I'm an infantile fool, but Cindy, you're only 22. You're gonna get your love life together. I'm 33. I don't have to choose. I don't know what I want more, love, or to have a baby with a normal man. Probably both. Please help me. Please understand my situation. It's only 2 weeks. I'll even pay you personally, on top of what you're getting paid. Maria, I'll help you, but I have a very serious favor to ask of you two. A very serious favor. What kind of favor, tell me? How can I explain it to you? I don't have a place to live. Did you break up with Mark? No, it's not about him. I just need to sort something out. I'm asking you to let me stay with you for 2 weeks. I won't touch anything in your apartment, I promise. I won't bring anyone over, don't think. Okay, Cindy, we're talking like we're strangers. Put your feet up and come over here. I'm waiting. Cindy exhaled with relief and quickly walked towards the bus stop with Maria. Not that they were close friends, but they were very good to each other. Maria was older and wiser, and Cindy was younger and kinder. Anna, the pharmacy manager, often put them on the same shift, and just like that, between the colleagues began a friendly relationship. They could not grow into a strong friendship for one reason only. The orphanage past put a stamp of distrust on the girl. And in general, life showed that you should not tell people more about yourself than they need to know. But now Cindy understood, since she had asked to stay with her colleague. She was in for a few revelations. Hi there, what took you so long? Maria met a girl in a beautiful silk robe. Hi. I took the wrong bus. I forgot that the unit turns towards the sewage treatment plant. Well, get undressed. I've just put the kettle on. Let's have some tea. Cindy undressed and smelled baked goods in the house. Come in, sit down. The landlady sat down in the kitchen. Cindy, I know it's not nice of me to pry. But as your senior mentor, I have to know what you're hiding from someone. What if you were being chased by criminals? They tracked you down, they're gonna break into the apartment and kill us, and that's it. Cry my honeymoon nights in Dubai. Cindy laughed for the first time that night. No, Maria, there are no criminals. But I'm only here because a crime could have happened tonight. That the woman almost dropped the candy from his hand. Okay, Maria, calm down, sit down. I'm gonna explain everything to you right now. I just need to know that you're not gonna tell anyone good. No, Cindy, I won't. Anyway, Sophia, Mark's mom, tried to poison me. I mean, literally. I didn't tell anyone I was coming home early, so I thought I'd surprise her. So I did. I walk into the apartment, and with my own ears, I hear her on the phone telling her sister she wants to treat me to some special mushrooms. and she's gonna put some other non-poisonous ones in her plate for Mark and me. Here under the hatch, she has a bunch of sack jars, bunches, mushroom and caviar of all sorts. I don't know why I'm always drawn to mushrooms. I don't usually go for her pickles, but I eat mushrooms all the time. Well, I got that right. You're going to the police tomorrow and report a crime. No, I'm not going anywhere. I'll try to figure it out on my own. Olda, nowadays investigators don't have primitive methods. They can print out a phone conversation and nail the old woman for even intending to poison you. You're right as always. But there's one thing. Sophia, Mark's mom, who I live with. So you want to discount her as a future mother-in-law? And the fact that you could get poisoned and die, that's just a small thing. Cindy, shut up. I'm sorry, Cindy, just no love carrot should obstruct justice. I know from my own life experience, the problem has to be dealt with head-on. What if they don't give you mushrooms, but fried potatoes with rat poison? You like potatoes too, don't you? Cindy sat and stirred with a spoon, having already left the tea. Maria didn't calm down. I'm sorry, of course, that I'm here with my advice. I want to do what's best for you, so that you don't get hurt. Would a normal, loving guy take the side of a mom who's gonna poison his girlfriend? I think he would. Cindy said sadly, there can be many girls, but a mom is one, and he's her only son. Well, of course, if it's a picture son, he'll indulge his mom in everything. He'll make tea off your head and give you a drink, just to be sure. But I think you should understand, friend, people meet each other in trouble. Honestly, when I had you like, a loving husband. We had a great life, we went on vacations, I was young. And you're still pretty. Oh, thank you. So I was young, naive, and thought that they would love me till the grave forever. But then the unexpected happened to me, or rather pregnancy. I suffered, I had an operation, and everything seemed to end well. But then he lost interest in me all at once. I went to all the decent doctors in our city. They wrote me 10 papers that everything was fine, that I'd have kids. And he still looked at me like I was second-rate merchandise. You know the ending. And now, after all this time, I realize it was meant to be. There had to be a moment that set things right. I understand you, Maria, all Cindy. I'm boring you already. I feel at home, whatever you want. Eat whatever you want. Don't bring in the men. Maria laughed contagiously. Come on, just kidding. I know you all, I put you to sleep on the couch. In the morning, they went to the pharmacy to negotiate with the manager about working shifts. Cindy stayed at work, and Maria, having already folded a suitcase of things, went straight to the airport. It was still 6 hours before the flight. At work, Cindy got a call from Mark. The guy was sure that she was now in another city and was already waiting for her to come home tomorrow evening. Feeling jealous and resentful, Cindy thought of asking Mark straight in the forehead what he was doing in her absence. But the instinct of self-preservation prevented the girl from giving herself away. And Mark, strangely enough, was extremely calm when he heard that she had a work emergency. A breakdown at work, and she would be back only by the end of the next weekend. In the evening, arriving at Maria's apartment, Cindy studied how the local appliances worked, threw things in the laundry, and put the already cooked cutlets in the microwave to heat up. She was in foreign walls, but strangely felt very calm. It was paradoxically a good mood. Even in such a horrifying situation, it was understandable. No matter how hard Cindy tried, becoming her own person to Mark and Sophia was not working. After working in their apartment, it was rare to be able to really relax. The woman followed her around, not to chastise or lecture, but to find any excuse not to leave the girl alone in the house. The constant thought of whether Sophia Pavlovna would like it, how she cooked, cleaned, how she sat on the sofa, quietly soup left her brain. Cindy herself did not admit it to herself and kept to her internal attitude. Lots of people have a 100 times harder life than she did. Why should she change? At the same time, Mark felt very comfortable around his beloved mother and did not hesitate to behave the way he wanted. Cindy had all the manifestations of love and emotions for him only outside the apartment. When young people occasionally went for a walk, Cindy walked around Maria's 3-room apartment and did not know what to do. The girl noted that the landlady was a true cleaner. Everything is gradually cleaned. Nothing had to be done. There was to Miss Mark, but immediately caught herself. There was no time for that. Now, she had exactly a week to figure out why she wanted to be poisoned. Unintentionally, her eye fell on a beautiful statue of an African woman with a candlestick-shaped cup on her head. She remembered what Maria had said about this statue when she came from Tunisia, where she had gone on vacation last year. She picked up the weighty woman and took out a piece of paper with a phone number. Not thinking long, the girl dialed the number, and after a minute a pleasant voice in the receiver answered, "Hello, hello." Quietly said Cindy, "Hello, I'm listening to you attentively. You see, I've never called a healer or a psychic. It's very difficult for me to explain why I'm calling you and you're explaining to me. Just come." On the other end of the wire answered calmly and authoritatively, "I wanted to say at once that I don't have any extra money. Don't take offense at me. I just heard about different cases. So maybe your case doesn't require any money at all. Is there such a thing?" "Well, of course it happens." She laughed. "I'll be there. Tell me, where do you live? Wait. I have an appointment a week in advance, so I'll see if there's a free number. Although, I always have time for doubters. Come by tonight at 10:00 p.m. if you're not afraid to walk in the dark. Write down the address. I'll definitely come." Cindy hung up the phone and breathed a sigh of relief. The clock showed 8. We had to hurry. I'd never heard of a street like that in our town. I'd have to look it up on a map. Where is it? It was exactly 9:45. The girl stood hesitantly outside a large red brick mansion. The mansion near the house was enclosed by a high fence and looked quite intimidating. The streetlights were already on and the house number could be seen without much difficulty. Cindy's heart was pounding hard. Why had she come here? What was behind that fence? What if there are crooks? What under the guise of good fortune tellers, or even worse, pimps? And in general, it is not a good thing to go to all sorts of magicians. Sin of doubt overcame the girl not on a joke. She had already taken a few steps back, but immediately stopped. If I found this piece of paper by accident, it means that it was not just for nothing. Fears, all my life, I'm sick of fears. I can't go on living in ignorance like this, so let someone help me. Cindy confidently pressed the intercom bell. Out of the corner of her eye, noticing the camera, which was looking directly at her, the weighty iron door of the gate fell away, and the girl saw an elderly man of pleasant appearance in front of her. Hello, ma'am. Cindy is waiting for you. Follow me." Cindy walked along the paved and large stone path and cautiously looked around. In the courtyard, plants unfamiliar to her were in full green, and from far away came the delicate smell of blossoming apple trees. What a beauty! Probably the one who takes care of such a garden, by definition, cannot be a bad person. The girl's mind flashed. Wait here. The man left Cindy in the spacious hall and left. Before she could look around, a maid came to her and invited her to the nearest room. Cindy sat down on the soft orange couches and began to look around the room. It was all too modern. No heavy parterres, bulky furniture, or dangling chandeliers. Lush orange curtains to match the color of the sofa and chairs. Chocolate-colored walls, glass coffee table. It was the first time Cindy had seen such a trendy interior. But she was especially struck by the crystal vase with oranges and tangerines on the low wooden side table between the armchairs. "Would you like an orange?" The voice of a woman in a silk robe seemed to come out of nowhere. "Ah, hello, I'm just very pretty here. I've never seen everything color-coded like this, even the fruit." Cindy sunk her gaze to the floor. "Yes, my late husband loved to snack on chocolate, cognac. But the chocolate had to have a citrus note." The woman looked at the girl with a smile, and without embarrassment, it was so. "I have not forgotten the purpose of your visit. My name is Betty, by the way." "No, I'm not embarrassed. It's just that Cindy gave me a look. You were expecting a little different decor." Yeah, crystal ball, candles, all kinds of magical paraphernalia." The woman paced back and forth, and her chocolate robe fluttered with every movement of her hostess. "No, I don't need this. To tell a man what he needs. I just need to hear him and look him in the eye. Cindy took the statue by the waist to get a better look. Suddenly, a small rolled-up piece of paper fell from under the statuette. Cindy bent over to pick it up and unfolded it. On the piece of paper was written a phone number and the phrase, "Betty will solve any problems." Oh, how trivial. Cindy Betty didn't hold back. We'll solve your problems and get rid of the extra money. It's a miracle. That's what I'm talking about. The girl shoved the paper back under the statue and went out onto the balcony. The balcony was not behind glass, and the view from the 12th floor was amazing. No high-rise buildings, window to window, only space and freedom. A large, cozy yard with garages and a playground smoothly flowed into the park. It was laid out quite recently. The neighborhood was a new zoo. After all, the bank of the river was changing, and on the opposite bank darker, whether not yet inhabited new buildings with rare lights of windows, a little bit to sink. Cindy decided to go to bed. No matter how hard she tried, the plan to figure out the strange circumstances in her head was still not coming together. The next day at work went as usual. Customer service and slanted glances, the head of the office. On the contrary, it seems that a pharmacist is free to work as he wants. In fact, trade is trade. And in the next yard opened a pharmacy, a competitor. And it was necessary at all costs to keep the customers of old ladies from neighboring houses. Anna clearly kept her hand on the pulse, so that the staff first of all advised expensive drugs. They told about cheap analogs of expensive drugs to the customers. But Cindy's born honesty kept her from doing so, which are strictly prescribed in the prescription. The other was simply to give good professional advice. When, for example, an old grandmother asks for ointment for back pain, and she does not have a lot of money. In these cases, Cindy simply has no moral right to offer her an expensive ointment, when there is exactly the same one with the same quality of active ingredient, only cheaper. Such liberty constantly annoyed the superintendent. After all, their pharmacy chain was private, and both salaries and bonuses depended on the sales plan. But all this was nothing compared to the feeling Cindy had when customers thanked her for her help and told her that the ointment or pills had worked well, helping everyone who came to the pharmacy with their physical and mental pain. Cindy felt a great relief, as if she had helped her own mother or grandmother. And the customers, in turn, also shared with the girl kindness and warmth of heart. Once during a break, Anna told Cindy to come to her office for a conversation. The girl thought that they wanted to blame her again for the low sales of imported vitamins and cough syrup. She didn't expect the conversation to be about something else entirely. The manager thanked Cindy for her hard work and help in opening the new pharmacy and informed her that she had found a worthy replacement for her, and not just any pharmacist, but a pharmacy technician. Today, she can finish her last day of work and look for another job. The new employee starts tomorrow, and Cindy will be fired without any problems. All attempts to have a nice talk with Anna came to nothing. The woman was adamant that complacency is not welcome in their line of work. And the plan is the plan. How can this be? I'm a good employee, and I was thrown out like a dog. Cindy walked down the street from work and mentally tormented herself. I tried for people, and who else would I try for? And sales were good. And a lot of people came to us. The girl felt sorry for herself. It was like something broke inside. Okay, Sophia and Mark, I never became for them. But work is my mainstay in life, my vocation. How could it be that I even lost it? Cindy came into the apartment and sat at the banquet. That's kind of weird. I wanted to solve one problem, and I got a whole bunch of problems. I can solve anything. Cindy repeated this phrase and came closer and closer to the African statuette. It's simple. The woman sat down next to Cindy. You know, Betty, I don't feel comfortable talking about this, but let's talk about payment right away. How much will you charge for your services? Listen, how's Cindy? Look, Helen, I won't charge you yet, but not because I don't need it. Or I'm doing charity work. I just see that you need it more right now. And when things are going well, then you can bring me some. When things are good? Yeah, that's right. Betty, I came to you because my soon-to-be mother-in-law wants to poison me. Well, she wanted to. I overheard her on the phone and snuck out of the apartment. My young man, Mark, Her son thinks that I am still on a business trip and does not know anything. I am now staying at a coworker's apartment, and today was my last day of work. I've been fired from my job. I'm Cindy the pharmacist. It's good. It's very good that all this happened to you just fine. The girl looked at Suzanne in surprise and froze in mute question. There is a proverb, if it were not for luck, but misfortune helped. And this is just your case. Mark is not your man at all, and you should not suffer and kill yourself over it. But I love him. I wanted to start a family with him. Sweet girl, it's normal at your age. Putting people on a pedestal, and none of us are immune to mistakes and disappointments. But stop making excuses for people who take advantage of you. Stop showering them with your kindness and love. Do you need to concentrate on other things right now, on finding a new job? Cindy asked quietly. No, don't worry about work. What's important for you now is to find your mother. You will help her, and she will help you. The main thing is not to mind her help. The girl sat still. What she had stopped thinking about for years was a pipe dream. Now was so close and sounded so true that all other questions for Cindy simply ceased to exist. My mom's alive. I'm begging you, Betty, don't joke around. Don't do that to me. You just turned my soul inside out. I can't bear it if it's a lie. It's the truth. Your mother's alive. I can feel it. I can't tell you where she is, but she's not very far from here. How do I find her? Right now you need to go, not to find your mother, but to find your brother. He knows exactly where she is. I see that your little brother is incarcerated, but not in prison, but not far from where you work. For me, I mean my job is not far from the police department. Is that where you're referring to? Yeah, I guess that's it. But why is my brother in police custody? Did he do something wrong? It's just a simple desire to make easy money. When you meet him, you might be able to help him and set him straight. Betty, how do you envision it? I go to the police and I say, oh, you know, I've got a brother in custody. I don't know his name, what he's charged with, what he looks like. Can I talk to him? But that's ridiculous. It wouldn't be hard for you to recognize your brother. You two look a lot alike. In fact, Betty abruptly cut herself short. I'm just telling you what I see. It's up to you to decide what to do. Madame Cindy sighed heavily and stood up from the sofa, showing that the reception was over. I believe you. Wait, Cindy seemed to be trying to delay the fortune teller. And about the poisoning, why do they want to poison me? Jealousy, anger, and great resentment. You'll find out soon enough. Betty took the oranges, gave it to the girl. Eat, calm down, go home, and go to bed. The mistress of the mansion once again looked at Cindy carefully with her brown eyes and quickly departed. Once outside the gates of the house, Cindy could barely dial the number of the cab with trembling hands. She didn't know where to put the unwanted orange. The girl began to peel the fruit with all her might, all around for a splash of juice. Such a mixture of feelings Cindy had probably never experienced before. The feeling of euphoria and happiness from what she heard was replaced by heartbreak. Why hadn't she looked before? Why didn't she go anywhere? Maybe it was because she had been beaten into her head since childhood that her mother was dead and there was no one to look for. Did the people around the girl know the true state of affairs, or did they deliberately want to protect Cindy from unnecessary worry and suffering? How could she believe them? Why had there never been a similar circumstance with poisoning? She wouldn't even have had the thought that it was possible to address to the director of the orphanage, to the archives, to the passport office. There's lots of other places. Yeah, even people like Betty. The feeling of resentment at herself and dissatisfaction with the reception, which gave hope and more questions, turned into a severe headache. Arriving at the apartment, Cindy immediately popped a pill and fell into a dream. The next morning was no less interesting than yesterday. No sooner had the girl woken up and picked up her phone than she saw 8 missed calls. Anna Cindy had set the phone on silent and silent mode since the evening so that no one would disturb her while she was at Madame Cindy's. Without hesitation, she immediately dialed the superintendent's number. Anna, hello. What's wrong? I haven't turned in some reports. The girl's voice sounded confident and even rude. Cindy, I'm sorry to bother you. It's just the new employee quit. She got scared, I guess. We've had a nonstop incident. It's a long explanation. Could you come to work? Anna, come out for a while or something. You know, I don't even know what to do. Maybe she'll come to her senses and come back. I mean, you're ready to shut me out again. Like there's someone better on the horizon? Cindy, it's definitely you I'm talking to. Anna, don't be sarcastic. I worked at your pharmacy for 2 years, and you fired me just because I didn't push expensive American vitamins on your customers. Expensive American vitamins, although I was selling our excellent vitamins with no worse composition. There was an awkward silence on the other end of the line. If you wanted to go to work, I have a few conditions for you. You must let me work in peace and not poke me for every pill not sold. And the second is that I get the same bonus as the other employees. I get the most customers on my shifts. And I'm not just meeting sales targets, I'm meeting them. Cindy, do you understand what you just said? I don't just understand, Anna. I'll tell you more than that. You've been taking advantage of me all this time and acting not like a professional, but like a person who only cares about profit. How many uncertified drugs have passed over your counter? How many people have you forced to offer those drugs to? And if any of them got hurt? Cindy, the voice of the superintendent, a hustler. Come to work today. I'll agree to your terms. Take it easy. Everything will be fine. Anna, I've already got some important things planned for today. But tomorrow, I'll be able to go on the second shift. Would you be so kind as to have the paperwork done by the time I get there so I can get to work right away? Okay, Cindy. We'll be waiting for you. Cindy put the cell phone on the nightstand and sat on the bed dumbfounded by her boldness and non-toxicity. So that's how it works, not being nice to everyone all the time. Maybe Betty is right about swinging her kindness at everyone, though I won't jump to conclusions. My restraint has at least saved my life. But being braver is definitely something to be brave about. An hour later, Cindy was at the police station near the pharmacy where she worked. Hello. Cindy walked up to the front desk window and leaned in. I'm sorry, my request will seem very strange to you, but I've been told that I have a relative detained here. A young guy, I don't know his name, but he looks a lot like me. The officer on duty looked at Cindy with undisguised suspicion and asked for a passport. Here you are. The girl quickly handed over the documents. The policeman approached a second officer sitting nearby. They both looked at Cindy carefully, then at her passport and looked at each other. Wait a few minutes, sit down over there, said the officer on duty and started to call someone on the phone. 5 minutes later, a man with 5 stars on his epaulettes approached Cindy. Hello, you're Cindy. Hello, yes. I'm senior investigator of the investigation department of the police department, Police Captain David. I was given your request to see a detainee, allegedly your brother. I'd like to tell you that it's not possible at the moment. We can't let you see him because you don't have proof of kinship, and only relatives or lawyers are allowed to visit. But how is it? What is he accused of that I can't talk to him? I'm sure he's my little brother, and he's innocent. But I can't prove our relationship right now because I just found out yesterday that I have a brother. Tell me, where do you work at this time? What is your marital status and where do you live? Why do you think this young man is your brother? I worked for 2 years in a pharmacy just around the corner here. Cindy pointed to the right. I live with a young man and his mom. Yesterday I was fired from my job, and today I got a call asking me to come back. Why were you fired? I think I was fired because I didn't want to force people to buy unnecessary drugs. I'm on good terms with my coworkers, and they can back me up on that. I see. Your supervisor and your roommate can corroborate these facts? Yes, of course. Of course, they can confirm everything. Tell me what my brother is charged with. Your so-called brother is charged with illegally forging a prescription for a serious psychotropic drug. In this case, it was a powerful antidepressant. It happened at your pharmacy. The new employee who just started yesterday was very professional. She told this young man that the medication had just arrived and that he needed to be in the pharmacy for 10 to 15 minutes so that he could buy it back, while the guy was waiting and our officers managed to drive up to the pharmacy and detain him. I'm gonna ask you straight out. You assisted your brother in this matter. Me what? Yes. How could you think I would go against the law? I'm well aware of the risks involved in such things. In fact, if I wanted, as you say, to help my brother, would I send him to a woman I didn't know to set him up like that? Would I take the time to serve him myself and not call the police? Well, I don't know. Maybe you could have helped your brother if you hadn't been so hastily fired. And besides, you have cameras in your pharmacy. You'd be exposing yourself and shining a light on your own. And who knows? What if you provoked your own termination? I didn't help my brother. I have no reason to lie to you. You sounded insistent and firm. Yes, we have cameras, but every such medication is recorded in a special log, and the pharmacy staff takes the prescription. According to our records, you can easily trace when and to whom we sold narcotic and psychotropic drugs. And I didn't provoke the manager. My coworkers can attest to that. I asked to be kept on the job. Wait, Cindy, I hear you. I've already got our CID operatives checking all the information we have. You've told me enough. Now I have to go. I've got a lot to do. David, wait, please. You think I'm stupid enough to go to the police and turn myself in? That I have nothing to do but make myself suspicious? For the sake of meeting some unknown guy? Well, tell me, what reason would I have to do all that? Cindy, I may be a little older than you, but I don't look like a fool. Maybe it wasn't your brother at all, but your boyfriend, who you decided to take revenge on, and then you came to your senses. But how can you come to the department and say I think you have my brother in custody? It's not his fault, and it's not my fault either. But you don't know your brother's name or what he looks like. And on top of that, your brother's friend tried to buy a serious drug by false prescription from the pharmacy where you work. And somehow the new employee who called us quits after only one day on the job. And that's how you're doing. They're hiring you back today. Don't mess with my head. You're both accomplices and suspects. Wait, David. I can't prove my innocence, but listen to me for 1 minute. Please. Cindy, I can hardly keep from crying. I'm an orphan. I was raised in an orphanage. I've been told my whole life that I have no family. And then, by chance, I ended up with a woman. She's a psychic, and she was the one who told me where I should go. You mean you? Of course, this all seems silly to you. But believe me, desperate people can go to such experts. Betty, that's her name. She can confirm what I said. She said her brother would inform me about the mother. The investigator stared intently at Cindy and guided her with glances. But no look could compete with the girl's desire to know where her mother was. She did not care whether the police officer believed what she said or not. Cindy spoke so confidently and clearly that she was even a little shocked at her latent powers of persuasion. We'll check it out. Everything you say, I'll send my colleague to your pharmacy. Again, if you're going to be a witness in this criminal case. I can't let you see the detainee. Dryly, the man cut the man off. But I won't consider you in that capacity. Your officers have already been to see me since this morning, and their testimony is more than sufficient. They will be witnesses in the trial of this case. I will allow you to see this young man. In my presence, of course. The time of your visit, 5 minutes. Come with me. After a series of corridors and staircases, Cindy and David descended into a semi-basement room. The man led the girl into an office with a small window and asked her to wait. 5 minutes later, 3 investigators, a detention officer, and a boy with a swarthy appearance entered the office. The girl was simply dumbfounded by the resemblance to the boy. Wasn't that the main argument that she was allowed to see him? The young man was about 19, black hair, and big brown eyes. If it weren't for the nose and chin, it would be safe to say they were twins. Everyone sat down at the table. The guard unlocked the guy's handcuffs and sat down next to him, baton at the ready. It was obvious that the boy did not understand why he had been brought in. He looked at the girl with undisguised surprise. Well, Cindy, you have 10 minutes. Time is not a rubber band. The investigator cut him off. Hello, what's your name? Cindy started hesitantly. My name is Peter. The guy stared intently into the face of the interlocutor. You probably won't believe me now, but I think you're my brother. It was as if an electric shock had struck the boy. He shook and cried, covered his face with his eyes, and started rubbing his eyes hard. You could see it. He was embarrassed by his tears. I knew you would come." The young man wanted to hold out his hands to the girl, but hesitated, catching David's stern gaze. That's how it is. Cindy herself could hardly hold back her tears. "Peter, tell me what happened to you. Where's your mom?" She's alive. Our mom is alive, and she's very sick." "No, she's not lying down. She can walk. She can eat. She can drink. But she is. She's mentally ill. She told me about you. You made her sick. Why? Because of me? Because she put you in an orphanage. She was always regretting it and crying. And now she feels so bad. She used to dream about you a lot, and she kept saying you were in danger. That's what she used to say. I wanted to take these pills for her. I already told you here." The guy looked at the investigator sideways. "We don't even go to the hospital to see doctors like that. A psychotherapist, a psychiatrist, you could end up in the move house. Who will get you out? So my mother was afraid to go. I read that this drug makes it easier. I mean, it makes your head feel better. So I got caught like a fool. Peter, tell me where Mom lives. What's her name?" "My mom's name is Nadia. My mom and I live in a narrow alley, 3rd neighborhood in the 7th house." The staff smirked when the young man gave the address, but said nothing. "Peter, I'm going to ask you one last question, and I'll never ask it again. What makes you so sure that I am your sister?" The boy smiled. "Understand," the girl continued, not paying attention to his smile. "I grew up in an orphanage, and I've gotten used to the idea that I'm the only one I can't stand if it suddenly turns out not to be true. Cindy, my little sister, just look at yourself in the mirror and then look at me. We have different fathers, but the same mother. We look a lot like her. You'll know it when you see her. We're brother and sister. I don't even have to think about it. Time's up." David's out of his chair. "I'm gonna help you. Peter, I'm gonna help you. I don't know how, but I will." Cindy tried to cheer her brother up somehow. The detention officer told the guy to stand up and handcuffed him. "How did you find me?" Peter was already asking Cindy and trying to stay in the office. "I was guest." The girl only had time to see Peter's surprised eyes, and he disappeared behind the door. "Well, congratulations on the meeting." Cindy David said with a laugh or seriously. "What will my brother face if he is found guilty?" "Oh, it depends. It's up to the court. It's up to us to present the case to the judge, and it's up to him. He could get a real sentence. They could give him probation, or even correctional labor. I don't think so." Cindy realized from the indifferent look of the investigator that it was useless to ask him anything else. "Thank you for meeting me. David, I really appreciate it. I think it's going to be all right. Everyone has the right to make mistakes." "Cindy, but sometimes it's better to stop mistakes before they lead to tragedy, whether you like it or not. Your brother will get the punishment he deserves for his crime. And I don't want to bring nationality into this, but you should know that gypsies are not easy people. That's putting it mildly. Besides, I advise you to check your brother's parentage. Although I can't deny that you do look a lot alike. You just don't make me believe it." "If not to take into account your persistence," smirked the investigator. "I hear you. Thank you for letting me see my brother." Cindy looked at the man and left the room. In the first moments after leaving the police station, Cindy wanted to rush to her mother. She wanted to run, to fly, to look into her eyes, but for some reason she stopped and cried. The avalanche of emotions of the past hour literally and figuratively knocked her down. Realizing that it was not a good idea to cry under the cameras, near such a specific place, Cindy put on dark glasses and quickly went to a good part of the nearest park. The girl sat down on the farthest bench so that, God forbid, she wouldn't be seen by anyone she knew. No, she didn't sit down to once again question what her brother had said or what Betty had predicted. A sudden flood of memories came over Cindy. All that bitterness of understatement unloved. Already seemingly buried in the most hidden corners of her soul suddenly broke free and began to frantically remind her of herself, how she would have acted if she found out her mom was alive when she was 7 years old. So would she run to her mom now as if to hug and cry about her life, about how her Russian language notebook was hidden by her classmates, and she got an F, just like her friend. How one day she refused to be friends with her because Cindy wouldn't let her wear her dress. Or how one day she went up to her teacher and childishly wanted to hug her. And then she told Cindy not to. Go away later, thank you. You're welcome. Thank you for what? For not having to get used to love and affection. For always having to hold in all the resentment, anger, joy, opinions. How has that helped her in life? I live in a coworker's apartment, hiding from my roommate and his mother, who wants to poison me. That's what she was driven to by her blind desire to be loved, needed, not to be alone. Oh, how I've missed your embrace. Mom, how I missed you. What would have happened to me if you had been there? What would have been my fate? Maybe I'd be like my brother in the police station waiting for my trial, or maybe I'd be on my hands. Or maybe I would have become a good doctor or teacher. Or maybe no, I wouldn't. I'm not going to think about what could have been and torture myself. I will think how hard it is for that boy, whose mom buys medicines for a huge amount of money. How hard it must be for the grown girl who, after the wrong treatment, now can't sit up or walk. How hard it must be for the mom who has suffered all these years. No, I'm not going to tell my mom all my grievances. I won't tell her why she left me, why she didn't take me away. I don't know all the reasons, forcing her to do such a thing. It's a good thing she's even alive. Thought about it. Cindy got up from the bench and walked to the bus stop. The neighborhood Peter had named for her was completely unfamiliar to the girl. But she knew from the staff that many gypsies lived there. Paradoxically, despite her own almost gypsy appearance, Cindy did not even closely identify herself with these people. Nor, indeed, had she ever encountered them. Moreover, she unconsciously tried to prove to others that there was nothing gypsy about her. She dressed modestly and discreetly, often tucked in her curls, never had any conflicts with anyone. Yeah, and she had such a serious job. All this left no one even a chance to think that the girl could be of gypsy roots. Finally, reaching the right place, Cindy saw almost exactly what I expected to see. A small wooden house, once solid, but seriously touched by time. It was enclosed by a high iron fence. The girl pushed the wicket door, but it was locked. She knocked. Once, twice, a third time. No one came out, and just as she was about to get worried, she heard a voice behind her. Who do you want? Cindy turned around and saw a woman about 45 years old. I need to see my mom Vanessa. The woman's face changed and she stood stiffly, Cindy's daughter. Cindy looked at her mother and could not believe what was happening. This is still a very young and beautiful woman. Mom, hi, it's me. A woman ran up to Cindy and hugged her. Cindy, my darling daughter, how beautiful you have grown. The woman gently stroked Cindy's face with her hand. Forgive me for putting you in someone else's hands. I'm sorry. A flood of tears gushed from the girl's eyes. But they were not tears of sadness or resentment, as they had been on the bench. They were tears of joy, happiness, the realization that here she is, her mother, her own native, albeit such a stranger. Mom, how glad I am that I found you. How I missed you all these years. Daughter, I'm sorry. Mom, I'm not offended. The main thing is that we met. The main thing is that I found you in a hug. They went into the house. Vanessa began to manage and all apologized for the mess, then put the kettle on the stove, then tried to find something for tea. Cindy could see how worried her mother was, how embarrassed she was in front of her for not having anything for tea, and the house not quite cleaned up. The girl took her hands and held them close to her. Don't worry, Mom, don't worry. Vanessa guiltily lowered her eyes and again began to repeat, sorry, daughter. When they finally sat down at the table, Vanessa calmed down a little and said, Cindy, I felt you would find me. I believed that you and I would meet soon, but I felt something else. I didn't want to tell you this right now, but I won't rest. If I don't tell you, someone wants to hurt you very badly. The person who lives next to you hates you. Tell me, my daughter, who do you live with now? The girl told her mother about herself, about Mark, about her work, about her life in the local orphanage. Cindy did not tell her about any childhood offenses or the fact that Sophia wanted to poison her. She remembered what Peter had said about her mother being in a lot of pain over the past few years. if she needed such strong antidepressants. She didn't want to get into tears and explanations about it. Now it was necessary to think how to help Peter. And she would somehow get out of her own problems after today's crazy day of talking to the superintendent, to the inquisitive investigator, and finally, the long-awaited meeting with her mother. All other problems did not seem as insoluble to Cindy as before. The girl gently asked her mother about the pills that Peter was trying to get for her illegally at the pharmacy. Vanessa answered not at once, but sighed bitterly. She said, "I don't treat myself with such pills." "Daughter, the police already asked me." I said I lost the prescription my doctor gave me. "So you're doing great, Mom," Cindy said. I was getting upset because it was a very serious drug. "Please don't tell anyone about this under any circumstances." I hid it from everyone. Peter and I moved here a year ago. Before that, we lived in a village 590 kilometers from our town. As soon as we came here, Peter was out of control. He was rude. He started disappearing with some guys in the evenings. I got in touch with them and got him as the youngest. That's how to make some money. They say you're a real gypsy. You have a port hand, and he fell for their tales. Vanessa cried. "But it's my own fault. It's my own fault. No job. I have a normal one." That's how I get interrupted with guessing at someone I don't spin. Like my sisters. I can't take a lot of money from people. They come to me with their own problems and troubles. How can I fool them? If I know what it's like. I can't see the light of day from grief. "Mom, why did you and Peter move here? And where did you get your sisters from? Are you from our town?" "Yes, my daughter, this is my hometown. I was born here and lived here until I was 16. But as fate would have it, I left." "Mom, tell me, I'm ashamed to look you in the eye." "Cindy, I'm ashamed to tell you all this. I'm afraid that when you hear it all, you'll just leave me forever." The mother took her daughter's hand, kissed it, and squeezed it tightly in her own hand. "Well then, pour yourself some more tea. It's going to take me a long time to tell you." Vanessa smiled sadly. "I grew up in this town on the next street over. A lot of my family still lives here. My mom died last year. I got to see her. She wasn't old, she was still 64. She had a sudden heart attack. My father's alive, thank God. But we don't talk. She and my sisters still blame me. They say that if I hadn't run away 25 years ago, my mother would have lived many more years. Our family was always very friendly. But it so happened that when I arrived, there was no place for me. I betrayed my parents when I was young, and it happened to you too. They don't think of me as one of their own here. No one helps me. Even though my cousin lives across the street, or my second cousin or third cousin. According to tradition, children should always listen to their mother and father, and I did. I guess that's how life goes downhill. When I was 16, my parents wanted to marry me off, but my mother wanted me more than my father. I was very pretty when I was young, and my parents had already agreed on everything with one family beforehand. They had a boy my age growing up. My sisters had been asked to marry me before, but my father felt sorry for me for some reason. He said I'd have time. With such a beautiful family life. So I lived like that in my parents' house because I did little by little. I was often with my sister's children, but my mother couldn't calm down. Since I'm not in the house yet, she said to my father that with such beauty, how could anyone deprive me of my honor before my time? I'll never be able to wash away the shame. We started preparing for the wedding. I had to get a dowry. I didn't like my future groom Yakov. I saw him sneaking around with my sisters when he was helping my father build a house. But you can't contradict your parents. I even accepted everything already. And then I met your father. We'd never have met him if I hadn't been asked by an aunt at the market to help her. Her daughter had just had a baby, and they were selling together. And Kelly was the aunt's name. She talked my parents into letting me help her. Not for free, of course, but for money. Said I needed to get my hand in the trade. I didn't know how to steal or guard anything by the time I was 16. I was standing on one row, and the aunt around the corner threw the third strings, as a customer something to choose. I called her right away, and he was already paying her back. Your Alexa's father was a loader at the same market. That's how we met. We talked and talked. We agreed that we fell in love with each other. He was a handsome guy, strong, tall. I liked him right away. And the fact that he was irresponsible, as it turned out later, I didn't care about that. How do you know I was? I met mine. And my aunt was watching me closely. She told my mother that I started talking to a Russian guy. After that conversation, my mother hurried to get out of the wedding. How then I wake up in the morning and she said to me, well, on the bargaining as if not trading anything. Today is your last day of work. I found a replacement for my sister. I didn't think that the love between me and Alex would flare up so much that I'd lose my head. That I obeyed my family. On the last day of work, I told him I'm not going to trade, I'll stay at home. And in 2 weeks, I'll get married. He was very upset. He was not himself. An hour later, he comes up to me and says, let's run. My grandmother lives in the village. She'll take us in. I'll get a job there. As soon as I heard that, I refused. And he told me you'll regret it all your life. You'll live with someone you don't love, shedding tears. It'll be too late. It's like an electric shock. I think that not only will I live like that, I'll have children from a man I don't love or worse, like my sister. Her husband consumes her at home, and she puts up with it. Where to go? Married with 2 children. That's how we decided. Alex and I are going to run away. I packed some things at home. I hid my bag at night behind the fence. And I told my mother that I went to my aunt to get some fabric. She promised me something for the wedding. I crossed 2 streets with the bag, and Alex was waiting for me there. We ran to the station and took the train. They didn't require passports back then. That's how we ended up in the village. And then Cindy, a little audibly, asked her mother, who did not seem to want to tell a continuation of the story. And then we came to the village. This settled at his grandmother Nina. Alex's grandmother was on his father's side. He hadn't seen much of her in his life. She seemed happy at first, but when she found out that I was a real gypsy, and that Alex had taken me away like that, she began to lament that we wouldn't have a life without parental blessing. Her son Alex's father George, that's pretty much what he did when he was 18, joined the army, and just before he was discharged, he got married. His mother got mad at him, and he left with his young wife here in our town. Had he known that his own son would do the same in 20 years? Only George didn't abandon his children. Vanessa wiped them with a handkerchief. He brought up his own tears. And Alex told his grandmother, then I overheard it, that he never thought of running away. Yes, his mother gave him conditions. She said, live with whoever you want, but not with a gypsy. That's how it turned out that we had no life. Everything seemed to go well at first, but Alex got a job. I helped my grandmother with the household. But she was getting meaner and meaner every day, even though she seemed nice. And when I got pregnant, she started eating me up. I cried a lot for my parents. I missed my relatives. But how can you go back? You heard your parents from a Russian guy? I got pregnant before the wedding. My blood pressure started to rise for the first time in my life, and other ailments came out. Although I've always been healthy, Alex was getting darker and darker. He wouldn't even hug me during the last few months. He'd go out on the porch and smoke and smoke. He didn't get enough money at work. The boss said, you're not from here. I only pay well to locals, and you were content with what you had. And it's a hard job carrying sacks. I asked Alex, why don't we go back to town and live somehow? We'll be closer to our own people, and that's the first time you really hurt me. Why did I ever get involved with you? I didn't listen to my parents. If my mother and father had taken you in as a gypsy, would I be wandering around like this? You're not even my child. Who knows if you've been fooling around? Well, I was dealing. When he said those words, it cut me to the heart. I cried and excused myself. But your father changed forever from that day on. Nina urged me to go home, and I told her they wouldn't take me back. I'll live alone with my child, and I'll be known as a whore. So she couldn't persuade me. Then she went to the hospital, to the maternity hospital, negotiated for me to be admitted without documents, and negotiated some other things. But she didn't tell me anything before the birth, apparently on purpose, so that I'd give birth to a big baby and not do anything to myself before the birth. She packed some stuff for me. 3 diapers Alex didn't give me. I gave birth to you in February. I gave birth hard. Vanessa lowered her eyes. The doctors shouted push, but I have no strength. 50 kilograms of weight with you. The nurses are mad as dogs, they say. Say thank you. Why are we even helping you? You have no papers, no conscience, and all I do is cry. I think I'd like to give birth to a healthy baby. That's how you, my daughter, appeared at 7:00 a.m. And I have no family, no documents. What should I do? I gave birth to you on February 16. We didn't have cell phones back then. We had regular ones. I call Nina, and no one at home answers the phone. I wanted Alex to tell them you were born. You were so quiet at first, but on the second day you started screaming. The doctors say you're hungry, and I don't have enough milk. And what kind of milk can you get from such a disorder? 2 days later, I'm discharged, and I haven't heard from anyone. How do I get home? I don't know. I went to the nurse. I told her you know my mother-in-law, Nina. She worked at your hospital until she retired. Tell her I gave birth to a baby girl and I can go home now. And this woman stood in front of me and said loudly, "Did you come down from the moon or not? I don't need you. No, I don't need you." I cried and told her, why does she say such things to me? I gave birth to such a beautiful girl. You, when were you born? Her eyes weren't brown. They were blue and your hair was light brown. I even thought you looked like your father the first time I saw you. And the nurse says to me, "Didn't Alex tell you that he's going home to his parents? And Nina, don't call anyone mother-in-law anymore. You're her and no one can call you anything. And you've done magic on a young boy and you think it's all in the bag. Stay in your room and keep your head down." I rushed into the room, put you on the bed, kissed you, and jumped up on the windowsill. You wanted to throw yourself out of the window. A nice woman grabbed me by the legs. She said, "Where are you going to leave your daughter an orphan?" So she stopped me. I didn't jump. It just all came at once and there was no one to help me. I didn't expect Alex to be so mean. I thought he'd see you and everything would work out. And he did this to me. I was lying in the ward crying. And then a woman in a white coat came up to me, a nice woman. And she talked to me for over an hour, asking me who the child's father was, where I lived, how I got here. I told her everything as it was. And she suggested I put you in an orphanage. Cindy asked quietly. "No, my daughter, no." She suggested that I give you to another family, to give you up. Vanessa cried again. I didn't want to, my dear, and I didn't want to leave you like that. But I knew I had nowhere else to go, and I was very afraid of my parents. This woman assured me that you would live in a good family, you would not need anything, everything would be fine. I didn't know you'd end up in an orphanage. God knows I didn't know. Maybe someone did take me into a family. Since you say my hair wasn't black at first and my eyes were dark blue. And then they saw that my genes were taking their toll, that I was black, and they probably gave me to an orphanage right away. Cindy sat up to her mother and hugged her, though who knows what those people had in mind. The woman told me not to look for you. She told me not to hurt your fate. She promised me that you'd be fine, that you'd live somewhere else, that you wouldn't be kicked out, that you'd have a loving family, they would take care of you. That's how I gave you away, hoping that your life would be better than mine. Vanessa covered her face with her hand and was silent. And then how did your fate turn out, Mom? And then what happened? I left the hospital alone without you, without any documents. I came on foot to my grandmother, Alex, and asked her to leave me to live a little, until I found another place to live. She didn't say anything, didn't ask where the kid was. She just didn't say anything. But she made it clear that I could stay with her for a while. I laid there for a week crying. And then I went to the woman at the hospital who talked me into giving you up. I asked her for help. When she saw me, she hissed. She said, "Get out of here so I don't see you again." And I'm Maria. I had nothing to lose. I told her to help me with my job. Or will I come to you every day? She told me to come back tomorrow, as if she'd help me. And the next day, when I came, she took me to a secluded place, and there was a man standing there, a relative of hers. The two of them grabbed me by the scruff of the neck. I thought they'd kill me. They came up at me with such anger, saying, "Don't let your spirit be in the hospital." It told me not to go near the building itself. I was so upset at that moment. I decided to get you back, no matter what. I don't know how I'm gonna live, but I'm gonna get you back. I told them I'd go to the police and tell them everything as it happened. That there's a note about me in the hospital records. And the man laughed in my face and poked me with some cards. He said that he was a police officer himself, and that they would put me in jail in no time. I cried. I said I just wanted to ask for help. Why did you do that? The man shoved money in my fist and said that if he ever saw me near the hospital again, he would put me in jail. I left the building. I was crying. I sat down on a bench. I saw young people having a wedding. I felt so sad, so sick. And I was only 17 years old that day. And my fate is such a worthless fate. I went back to Nina's house, told her everything. I showed her the money and asked her what to do now. She said she'd buy me some linens and bedspreads for cheap, and I'd go out and sell, so no one would bother you. They wouldn't steal anything. He put me near his friend Uncle Nick, who has been fishing and trading at this place for many years. He was 57 years old at the time. He was 67, and that's how I came to live with her. And I cried to you all the time. Yeah, thinking about how to get out of poverty. If it hadn't been for Uncle Nick, would you have been killed somewhere? They threw me out. Times were tough back then. Nina didn't talk to me much about anything. I tried to ask her where Alex was. Does your father live? And she forbade me to even think about him. But I didn't hold a grudge against her, because she taught me a lot about cooking and gardening. I'm very grateful to her for that. I did not socialize with the local gypsies, although one guy looked at me, but I didn't even look at him. He was very handsome and handsome. And what am I? A freeloader. I've got nothing. That's what happened to you. I couldn't just spit and forget so quickly. It's been 2 years. I started to climb out of poverty. I only knew the house and the market. So I lived with Nina. It's getting duller now. And I kept thinking how I could return home. I missed my parents and my sisters a lot, and I didn't just come to visit. I wrote a letter to my cousin about Robin. I was afraid to write to my cousins before my own sisters. Otherwise, the letter would have gotten to my father. And in that letter, I foolishly told him everything. I decided to complain. 2 weeks later, I got the letter. Oh, how I cried. How I suffered again. She told me that the letter had come to her husband by accident, and he couldn't think of anything better. He read my letter and then gathered everyone and read it again, and told me not to set foot in my native land. Since I did such a thing with my child, but I wrote, he took such a step not to shame my parents and sisters, but as an admonition to young people to think with their heads when they want to disobey their elders. And my mom, when she heard about me, yes, in front of everyone. She had a heart condition, and my relatives turned on me. I should have come to my relatives to apologize, to ask for forgiveness, not to believe a letter. But I was cowardly. I was afraid of the punishment of condemnation. I was so worried that he went to the hospital. And there's a guy there. He worked nearby, who liked me. He was a house painter who started renovating the place. That's how we got to know each other. His name was James. He looked very young. He was 12 years older than me, and he was already a widower. His wife died a few years ago. He had everything he needed to live. He had a house from his parents and a car he'd earned himself, but he wasn't happy. 3 months later, he and I got married. I moved out of Nina's, and they lived in his cabin. James was a hard worker. We lived together. That's what blood means. How did he surprise me? You won't believe the books he read and told me about. I'd never read a book before I met him. Slowly, little by little. Our business was booming. I was working, trading. He drove me everything by car, drove me away, guarded me, didn't let anyone offend me. Then we had Peter. His father loved him very much, and Peter loved his father. But we didn't have any more children. It was fate. And me. I spoiled Peter very much. I poured all the love I didn't give you on him. If it wasn't for his father, I don't know how he would have done in school. I went around begging the teachers to let him stay. While we were living with James, they put a new house in the village, bought a new car. I had a baby with my parents. I started calling my sisters to visit them. They came to visit us a few times as a family. Everyone came except my father. I gave them nice presents. I tried to make it up to them. It was like life started to get better. Everything started to run its course. But then, 3 years ago, disaster struck. We'd had our own outlet for a long time by then, and James used to go shopping. We were selling textiles. He was coming from a neighboring town. And then he fell asleep or something happened to him and drove into the oncoming traffic and collided head-on with another car. I couldn't say a word for 2 days after I found out. I couldn't stop crying. My relatives came to the funeral, and his relatives came, sisters, cousins. They started accusing me of ruining him with my trade. I had to travel all the time. I barely managed to keep up with them. Maybe they were jealous that James had made all his property on me, and as he felt, he said, "Let me draw up all the documents for you." That's why his relatives started visiting me. I'd organized the funeral myself. I had to take a big loan at high interest to make everything honorable. Peter couldn't believe his father was gone. I thought he'd help me later, but he wouldn't let me. He says, "You've been dealing with your father all your life. I grew up on my own. I don't want to mess with your stuff. That's the way it is." After James died, it was a mess. Tax audits started coming in one after another. I couldn't pay them off. And after one, they wanted to put me in jail. Alleged bribery. I sold my car and garage to pay off my debts. Then we started to sell the goods slowly. I could have hired a man to help me. But after all that grief, I just gave up. I didn't want to do anything. I resisted everything. Peter here finished school at 18. He stayed for a second year once, and 2 weeks later, he received a summons to the army. I went to one friend and another. Nobody wants to help. What's the army for him? He's had gastritis since childhood. And he's unprepared. He's neither athletic nor strong. I got up courage. I went to the military officer. I said, "I have one only son. Why are you sending him to the army?" And he told me, "You're not an invalid and you can support yourself. You've got a registered shop. So your son, like all normal guys, is subject to conscription." I think not. I don't want my son to be bullied in the army. But what kind of gypsy is a soldier? I lost you. I didn't want to lose Peter too. I found a man in a neighboring town who could help me. But he asked me for such a large sum of money that I had nowhere to go. Peter, when he heard that I needed so much, he immediately decided to serve. She says, "Don't sell the house, Mom." What am I supposed to do? Why do I need this house without my son? We packed up the house in 2 days, took it to the garage, and sold it in 2 weeks. I lowered the price and hired an agent to help with the paperwork. Sami all this time at a friend lived at home. Everything was resolved in the end from the army. They didn't take Peter. With the money left from our huge house, the only thing we could buy here was this. You can see for yourself, what a dwelling. Vanessa looked around the room. Peter didn't want to leave the village. He blames me now. He says that nothing would have happened to him if we had stayed in our native village. And the fact that I sold my last house to keep him out of the army, he doesn't appreciate it, doesn't understand it. He has no desire to study or work. And his relatives, Mom, they can't help. You communicate with them normally now. My in-laws, my daughter, they don't talk to me much. I called them when I was dealing with the army. They told me they couldn't help me. All our Roma boys are too young to get married. Almost all of them have 2 children by the time they're 18. And I didn't go to them for help. They didn't ask me to come here. I was drawn back to my homeland. I couldn't live in this village anymore, where I experienced so much grief, shed so many tears. My motherly heart told me that I should go back to the place where I was born. And I was not mistaken. I met you. I just don't know what to do with Peter. My sister told me about my son. They wouldn't even listen. You screwed up your own life when you were young by sinning. She's getting what she deserves. We've got a lot of kids to take care of, grandkids to support. You've lived your whole life somewhere, never helped your father or mother. And when did the trouble start? Did you come home like that? Cindy listened to her mother's confession and realized that it had not been easy for her all these years either. It was a small relief for her that she was a gypsy, but she did not talk and behave like the gypsies from the Tabor, and she stayed with her mother for another half an hour. Cindy drove to the apartment where she had lived all the way. The girl was thinking about how to get Peter out. She had some savings, but it probably wouldn't be enough to pay the lawyer's fees in full. And yet she and Mark wanted to. Oh, that sounds weird. She and Mark aren't anymore. They're with Mark. Vanessa's mom told me about where sacrificial love leads. Thank you. No refills. With Mark not calling or texting for 2 days now, we should help our own people and let strangers eat their own mushrooms. But what to do? Run to the bank, apply for a loan, ask someone to borrow money. Of course, my brother was a great handyman. But I won't find another brother like him, and I won't even find my own mother. But it was not only finding her own kin that was the main reason why Cindy was ready to get into credit. She, more than anyone, understood the importance of help in times of need. After all, she had help too. Maria's coworker let her stay at her place. And Betty, the psychic, didn't take any money at all. And who knows how her fate would have turned out. If she hadn't picked up a beautiful African statue, if she hadn't found herself in a completely foreign apartment. An hour later, Cindy was outside the law office. Not a moment's hesitation. The girl hurried inside. A young lawyer named Ethan listened to Cindy very attentively. You know, I have a maternal brother. He's 19 years old. Just a few days ago, he tried to buy some medication at the pharmacy with a fake prescription. It's a serious drug, not narcotic, but it's a kind of powerful antidepressant. That's the brother's name. How to put it, a Roma by nationality lives alone with his mother. According to his mother, this is the first time he has been in such a situation. I need to know how much your services will cost to keep him out of jail. Cindy, I hear you. I have a lot of details to work out. First, I need you to answer a few questions. Was your brother able to obtain this medication? No, he didn't. The pharmacist was able to call the police, and he was rounded up immediately. Was there a group of people involved in this case? I mean, was he doing it alone or with someone? He didn't do it alone. He was solicited by good friends who offered to make money by reselling the drug on the internet. But he told the police he was buying it for his mother. All right, Cindy, expect my call tomorrow. This preliminary interview was free for you. I'm sure there's a lot more nuance to the case, but I understand you're agonizing over your brother. That he hasn't been involved in any drug fraud schemes up to this point. Yes, I vouch for it. Reprimanded the girl. I have come across such cases before. It's good that your brother did not manage to sell the drug or even hold it in his hands. The price for my services will be about this. The man handed Cindy a sheet of information. Of course, it's still a preliminary rate, but I don't think it'll change much at the end. If you agree with the terms, just text me tonight, and I'll call you back tomorrow and set up a full meeting. Cindy thanked the lawyer and left the office. Getting to Maria's apartment, the girl studied in detail the rates and all the other ticklish moments. Yes, she didn't have that much money. After she and Mark started living together, Cindy rented out her small apartment on the outskirts of the city. But all the money went to the communal rent or other household needs. She didn't want to be on the dole, so she and Mark had a half budget. Plus to all this, the girl wanted to show Sofia Pavlovna that she did not come to everything ready-made. Cindy did not buy unnecessary trinkets and rags. Rarely traveled by cab, so for almost a year of living with Mark, she managed to save a small amount. She had even told Mark about it, hoping he would praise her. But the young man only grinned at the confession and replied, "Yes, you are a bargain bride. No father, no mother, no mortgage. And you will buy. Still turns out good for you." The next day, Cindy got up early. Anxiety did not leave the girl had to get ready and go to the pharmacy for a certificate of income. What if the director wouldn't take her back because of the recent stubborn conversation with Anna, or the investigator would show up and start asking tricky questions about the situation with Peter? With anxiety, she entered the building and was already mentally prepared for defense. But the excitement was in vain. To the great joy of the girl at work, she was very happy to see her. Her colleague, Lyudmila, told Cindy all the latest news. Especially, she described the arrival of a police detachment called to a young guy who tried to buy a fake prescription. The new employee reacted very quickly to the situation, but no sooner Anna praised her than she immediately quit, saying, "I have small children, and I do not want to leave them without a mother. Suddenly, this comrade will track me down and take revenge." That's why she quit without working more than one day. Ludmilla also laughingly noted that the guy was very similar to Cindy, adding there are such miracles in life. Having taken all the necessary documents from work, Cindy went to the nearest bank branch after checking through the databases and filling out all the papers. A loan for a small amount was immediately granted. The time was 11 o'clock a.m. when the lawyer called, and she was visibly nervous. She had to settle all the issues with him and be on time for her shift at the pharmacy in 3 hours. Finally, Ethan called her and set up a meeting at his office. Cindy made 2 agreements with a lawyer, one to defend Peter during the preliminary investigation, and the other to defend her brother in court. She paid for everything with the money she'd just gotten from the bank. Without putting the matter on hold, Ethan drove to Peter's place of detention. On the way, he dropped the girl off at work. While at the drugstore, Cindy couldn't find a place to go. They agreed with the lawyer that as soon as he got out of Peter's, he would call her, and they would meet in the park to tell the girl about the circumstances of the case. Upon hearing the call, Cindy asked for 20 minutes with a coworker and ran to a familiar park. Upon meeting, Ethan reassured the girl. Peter had been very clever. He didn't confess to the investigator that he wanted to buy the drug for resale. The sick mother theory would hold if Vanessa had ever been to the hospital. But so far, the version is the death of her husband and father, the ruin of the business, the deprivation of real estate, moving, and, as a consequence, the severe stress of the mother, the fear of going to the hospital of hope, to avoid being declared insane. And here's the result. The son wanted to help in this way found on the web information about the drug. He couldn't convince his mother to go to a medical institution, printed out a fake form from the internet, and went to the pharmacy. The positive moment in all this story is that your brother has no criminal record and has never been brought to administrative or criminal responsibility. I may be able to help testify in his defense. Careful, asked Cindy. No, you can't be a witness. Only your employees who were present in the pharmacy that day can testify in court. In particular, the pharmacist who resigned in a hurry. And in fact, you miraculously avoided questioning by coming to the department the day before yesterday. Apparently, the investigator was charmed by your brown eyes, the lawyer joked. Usually such strange circumstances like yours, immediately taken on the pencil. Tell me, what could Peter face for all this? Cindy didn't even pay attention to the compliment. She didn't care about that right now. I'll do my best, as long as the DA doesn't find anything else. Like your brother's accomplices. It's a good thing Peter didn't call his mentors or email them. And they discussed all matters strictly face-to-face. I'm sure these guys knew that they could check correspondence and calls. That's why they weren't supplied. And as for the sentence, as I said, it will depend on many factors, on the prosecutor, on the judge, on me, and on one more circumstance. What is that circumstance? No offense, but your brother is a gypsy, and that fact alone can serve him badly. We know these comrades very well what they're capable of. I see your point. But still, what's Peter facing? It could be a year. Probation could be a serious fine. It could be court-ordered community service. But it could also be 1 to 3 years real time. Cindy's pale. Don't get upset. It's not worth it. Ethan summarized. I'll stop by your mother's tomorrow afternoon. Will you tell her to be at home? I must go now, Cindy. I have to leave. Thank you for explaining everything to me. Goodbye. Cindy ran back to work. Yes, Ethan was a clever man, but how handsome. She remarked to herself, what the hell are you thinking? What am I thinking? She should be thinking about her mom, about herself, 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 about herself. If only it wasn't all for nothing. The rest of the time, Cindy worked like a bee, serving customers, counseling people on the phone. Every minute she tried to occupy herself with something to distract herself from her thoughts, especially thoughts about Mark. Did she love the man, or was she teaching herself to love him? How could it be that the conversation she had obeyed with Sophia had begun definitively and irrevocably? Rosta doesn't care about this immutable iceberg called love. Yes, Mark may be cheating on her or may have wanted to cheat on her. But how could she draw conclusions without talking to the person, finishing work, and taking the bus to her mother's house? Cindy dialed Mark's number. "Hi, what are you doing? How are things going with you?" The girl asked him. "Hi, I'm not really comfortable talking right now. I got held up at work. Mark, I won't be long. Listen to me for a minute." "Oh, come on, then you're not gonna dare." Okay, before Cindy took offense at Mark, she even now tried to justify his rude way of talking. But in fact, there was nothing to justify. She could hear the voices of guys and girls on the phone. Apparently, he'd stayed at work and they were celebrating. And she called him for the first time in 3 days and got this answer. Even if she didn't hear those women's voices, what difference would it make? When had she heard them all on Sunday? When Cindy approached Vanessa's house, it was already 9:00 p.m. The woman was sitting in the arbor in the fence, going through a basket of seeds, and waiting a long time for me. Asked Cindy's mom. "Yes, I've been waiting all my days. I took out a loan. She wouldn't give me a lawyer. He said he'd do his best to keep Peter out of jail. But still, the decision will depend on the judge, the prosecutor, and many other things. He could get a year's probation or a fine or community service." Vanessa cried, covering her face with her hands, just so that everything would be all right, just so that Peter would not go to jail. "Mommy, I believe. Everything will be all right," Cindy interrupted. Vanessa's crying. "I'm not trying to make you feel better, but I think this lawyer is a very smart man. And he's handled cases like this before. He also said Peter was very good. He didn't say too much under questioning. And he's got a good tongue. God willing, it would be so." The woman wiped her tears. "Thank you, my daughter. I'll be indebted to you for the rest of my life. I went to the sisters again today to ask for money to help Peter, but they wouldn't give it to me. They said, 'Don't go anymore, don't bother your eyes.' Mom, the main thing is that I have a job, and then we'll pay off the loan and I'll help you. As long as everything is normal with you and Peter. I don't care about anything else." Vanessa's daughter looked at Cindy carefully. "There's something you're not telling me. I can see you have a lot of sadness in your heart, but it has nothing to do with me or Peter. Tell me if there's anything I can do to help you." "Mom, can you see right through me?" I got scared. The girl smiled tiredly. "Yes, I really need help. But how? How can you help me? I have no idea. You tell me, and then we'll have an idea." Cindy sat down beside Vanessa and began to tell her everything that was weighing her down. Told her about her mother, about Mark, about Sophia. About accidentally overhearing a scary conversation on the phone about the intention to poison her. Vanessa gently interrupted Cindy and said, "Daughter, there's only one way to do this, but I know you'll give it up." Cindy did. The look would her own mother really offer her a fortune-telling. It's all so predictable. So the movie makers, a gypsy mom telling her daughter's fortune. That's hilarious. Does she have another option? Or she's forgotten who she found her mom and brother with? If she doesn't find answers in the next few days, she's gonna go crazy. Yeah, give it to Mom. Cindy waved her hand and stopped resisting what was happening. I wouldn't want to ever guess my own daughter. Vanessa picked up the cards. You can't peer into your children's fate. I've never guessed for you or Peter. How will you make your own life? That's the way it will be. But since it so happens that we don't know why a decent and beautiful girl wants to poison you. So we need to open that secret door, and the cards will help us. Vanessa shuffled the cards and asked Cindy to move the deck with her left hand. After asking a question, she began to spread the cards on the table. The woman sighed now and then and about shook her head, and still could not begin to speak. Mother, what's the matter? Don't be silent. Cindy couldn't stand it. An inheritance, daughter, for which they want to poison you. But what inheritance? From whom? From a very close relative. It's meant for you. That relative is alive. That's strange. And here comes a dead relative. I don't get it. So wait. Let's see your father, Alex. Is he alive? No. Alex is dead. He's not among the living. He's dead. Turns out the girl had her head down. What a pity I didn't get to meet him. Forgive me, Mom, for saying that. I realize that your father has caused you a lot of grief. It's just human nature. I'd like to see him. Maybe he thought of me once too. At least I found you with Peter. I've never looked for anyone, never even thought about it. What's school? What's work? And now I regret it. Don't blame yourself. Maria, all in good time. Alex left us. Not us. But if I'd met him, I'd have told him I gave you to someone else's aunt. And I don't even know where you are. The woman looked at Cindy. No, daughter, I'll never be able to make it up to you. Or will I die from my mistakes? Or do I repent and move on? What about Alex? Did he choose his own path? I loved him very much, but that's just the way it is. Vanessa looked carefully at the cards, and I looked at my father. Unexpectedly, Cindy asked herself, "You don't look like me anymore." He was handsome, but my blood wins out in you. Only your skin is light in your father's understandably light skin. Cindy sighed. A woman of age, but not of old. Vanessa placed a few cards on the table. Next to her, you share bread and blood, know some secret inheritance-related secret. She wants to ruin you for it. To find out everything, you have to go to this woman's house as soon as possible. Vanessa looked lovingly at Cindy. But all daughters showed up tomorrow to your failed mother-in-law and will find out everything. Do you think Cindy came out of the gazebo? She will tell us everything just like that. And if she doesn't want to tell us, we'll scare her. We'll say that you recorded everything on your phone, and we have dirt. Vanessa neatly folded the cards and hid them in a velvet pouch. Would it work? Cindy stared into the darkness of the street. It'll work. You just have to help me. You have to go with the pressure for a reason. But tomorrow the lawyer wanted to come by and see you, Mom. Oh, right. What are we going to do? I can't miss the meeting, and I have to do something to save you. No, Cindy, there's no choice. You're both my own children. Why don't you text Ethan half an hour before you get there? I'll be on the phone when he gets ready. We'll get in a cab and we'll drive back. Okay, Mom, I'm glad you're so adventurous. Cindy kissed her mother on the cheek. I also wanted to ask you something, but I don't think it's probably a good idea anymore. I'm waiting for you to ask about Mark, too. You looked at my life in the cards, and you didn't say a word about Mark. And what you say about him, daughter, I can see that. He doesn't love you. He had some feelings for you at first, and then it all went away like apple blossoms. He wants a girl who's loose, unbridled. He thought if you looked like a gypsy, you'd be just like him. And you, a modest girl, turned out to be decent. That's what this is all about. So it's my decency. Cindy grinned. Don't blame yourself, daughter, you're being decent. It's just that I can see you don't like him yourself. No offense. It's true, you've fallen in love with the first man you meet, who treated you well and promised you everything. What I don't understand is, with your beauty, why did you choose him? I'm sure you've had better suitors. Mom, you're looking at water, aren't you? I'm not surprised anymore. Yes, I've had some good guys and boyfriends. They offered me friendship, but I was so afraid. How can I explain it to you? I had a friend in an orphanage for a short time, but it didn't matter. Anyway, she's very pretty. She was a girl who graduated from school, went to college. It doesn't matter. So she studied. And so she kept telling me, I'm still young, fresh. I must find a groom. Do I have the right to be happy? She found a fiancé. He was a nice-looking guy. He had some kind of business. I think she was even jealous of me, afraid I'd steal him away. So we stopped talking. 6 months later, I'm standing at the bus stop, and suddenly I see her Helen. She's walking strangely, limping. Her face is all twisted. I walked up to her, and I was stunned. Not even a trace of beauty left. I said, "What's wrong with you?" And she tells me that this guy beats her regularly and slips her to his buddies. You know what I mean, Mom, what do you mean? I said, let's go to the police, and she didn't. What are you doing? He'll kill me right away. I have no family, no friends, no one to stand up for me. And his friends are all tough and connected. I told her, how can you let him abuse you like that? And she cried and said, why don't you know that orphanages don't treat us like that? And I took it for a reason. She was offended, I said. Maybe you shouldn't have chased riches and find a normal person to live with. Helen looked at me like that and said, look, don't let all this righteousness get you into trouble. That was the last time I saw her alive. 3 months later, I found out she'd hanged herself. Too bad about the girl. Too bad. Vanessa was sad. To kill herself in her prime. I feel sorry for her too, and ashamed. I am. I didn't do anything to help her. Then don't blame yourself, daughter, for chasing the good life. There's more than one girl like that gone. And about Mark, you don't have to think about it at all. He's no good for you. All right. The morning's the morning. Tomorrow we'll solve everything. Now let's go to bed. I've already put you up. The next morning at 10 o'clock, Cindy and Vanessa were already outside Sophia's apartment. Climbing the stairs, the girl stammered every now and then. Every step was so hard for her. She felt like a traitor who lied to her roommate about the business trip. Eavesdropped on the conversation his mom was still living in the middle of nowhere, with a suddenly declared gypsy mother, going to the showdown. The fact that Sophia wanted to poison her and Mark was trying to cheat on her was not taken into account by Cindy. The overwhelming event of the last few days seemed to override for her the significance of those horrifying moments, not hammered out in front of the investigator, the superintendent, and the lawyer either. Now Cindy felt like the same insecure applicant for a daughter-in-law as before. Noticing this, Vanessa stopped her and said there is no retreat or now or never. If you don't protect yourself, no one will, and you don't owe these two people anything. You've been living as their housekeeper, and they wanted to rip you off too. Cindy and her mom rang the doorbell and waited for someone to open the door. 3 minutes later, there was a shriek and the door opened. Oh, Helen, hello. Who are you here to see? Hello, Sophia. I came with my mom. The woman entered the apartment. The mother-in-law's face changed in a second. Well, come in. I really wasn't expecting guests. You should have at least warned me, because besides potatoes and mushrooms, there is nothing to treat you with. Sophia looked haughtily at Cindy and Vanessa. Cindy didn't even have time to think of what to say. Vanessa didn't mind what she said and shouted loudly, Madam, we are not mushrooms. We have come to eat your grass, and we don't need it for nothing. How are you behaving, gypsy? A man in my apartment. The woman's face turned Bagrove red. Spare me from your mother. Cindy, you can see she's insane. I didn't come to meet you. I came to ask why you were going to poison my daughter. Answer me quickly. And if you don't, you know we have a recording of you and your sister talking about how best to do it. Nowadays, modern phones can record sound from a mile away. Sophia didn't look so furious anymore. She stood silently against the wall and held on to the door jamb. Cindy, seeing all this, pulled some papers out of a folder and continued. It is in your interest, Sophia, to tell me what I did to you that you wanted to poison me. If you continue to keep quiet, I will call the police right now and show them this audio tape, where you say you're going to give me special mushrooms. I've already spoken to the investigator of our neighborhood police department. He said I can come in any time and file a report on your intent to harm my health. Sophia literally rolled down the hallway onto a small stool, unable to utter a word. Stop. Don't, Cindy. What's the matter with me? Come in, sit down on the sofa. I'll tell you all about it. Mother and daughter went silently into the hall and sat down on the sofa. The sudden change in the mistress's mood made them feel pity mixed with disgust. Yes, so it's time to begin, Sophia says. Very calm. When Mark was 7 years old, I met your father, Cindy. Alex. We started living together. Everything was fine for the first few years, and then he started to get, how shall I say, unhinged. He'd walk from side to side, or he'd sit in the same pose for hours. I couldn't figure out what was wrong. So I called him in for a serious talk. That's how he told me that when he was young, he had met a gypsy woman from our town. They moved to his grandmother's house. You could say they ran away. Then he started to have problems with his work. He started to pine in general. You know the rest. The woman looked at Vanessa with a sidelong glance. He didn't remember the incident for many years. As he said himself, he returned to his parents, worked hard, studied by correspondence. He met me later when we just started living. We didn't think about children. I already had Mark. I kind of and do not need children, but also work with the deputy head of the canteen. 300 people need to feed factory workers. Anyway, I thought our love would survive without a child together. But it turned out to be not so simple. Alex tried like a madman to prove to me that I should give birth to a girl. And I'm not used to being forced. I studied once secretly from him, even had an abortion. He accidentally found out about it and beat me for the first time in our life. After the abortion, or after the beating, I couldn't get pregnant anymore. Sophia cried. I went through all the doctors. They told me that you can't give birth this way and that way. I came home and told Alex everything. I wish I hadn't said anything. He became insane. He could just raise his hand against me at Mark. It wasn't often, but it still happened. Our whole life went down the drain. Then he thought about looking for you, Cindy. We traveled to a lot of orphanages together. But did we know what was so close? What was right under our noses? We thought you'd been given up near the village, not 600 kilometers away. A lot of kids have been revisited. I cried. I kept saying, let's take any girl from Chernivtsi and raise her as our own. But he wouldn't agree to anything. He tortured me and tortured me himself. We went to the maternity hospital, even to the village. But there wasn't a single record there. It's like you've fallen through the ground. And Alexa's grandmother, Nina, had died by then. She called him before she died and apologized. He didn't even realize why. It was only afterward that he was able to make ends meet. Why did she apologize for you? Sophia looked askance at Vanessa, but he didn't think to ask her anything. Not your address or anything else. What information? And after that, there was no life. He drank all the blood out of me with that search. We went to the police, made inquiries. We always got the same answer. Not found. No information. I didn't want to lose Alex. I loved him. And when he was in his normal mind, he was a kind, hard-working man who brought every penny into the house. He was 6 years younger than me. Where could I go then? And even with a child. At first, Leshat and Mark had a very good relationship together. We played some stuff, we put up with it. I couldn't be happy until he started thinking about you, Cindy, night and day. Could have ignored Mark for weeks. Told you so well. You have a mother and a father, but my little girl, she has no one. I don't know how she's doing. And the first time Mark hit her, the right ones, then all friendship between them came to an end. Alex thought that his stepson owed him his life, that he had adopted him, that he was supporting him. Mark hated him. He hated me for living with him and not kicking him out. What's the joke of being a teenager? Guilt tripping? My psoriasis worsened from nerves. I lost my job to gnaw on myself. Started to think I couldn't have a baby anymore. Because of you, by the way, both I and Mark suffered. The woman glared at Cindy, and I was torn between my husband and my son. I wanted to live a normal life like everyone else. I tried to smooth things over. But how can I compete with the mistakes of the past? Against you, Sophia. But what does that have to do with me? Can you be specific about that? Cindy couldn't take it anymore. How was I supposed to know it was like this with you? I didn't either. If I lived in an orphanage, if I'm gonna poison someone, I have to kill them. How did you even know whose daughter I was without a photo? I have a friend who works in the city archives. She set up the information to find you. And when I realized that you, Alexa's daughter, I froze in place from shock. I hoped you were dead or somewhere in the foster family. But no, you're alive and you're working right here. How did I get scared? I wondered if you'd get everything. So I decided to set you up with Mark so that the inheritance would be ours. And you didn't even realize how it happened. You thought it was an accident. I sent Mark to your drugstore and told him you were beautiful. I wish I had a daughter-in-law like you, and everything would have been fine. But that womanizing fool almost ruined everything. So Vanessa got up off the couch. Maybe we should get to the point. You've been talking for half an hour, but it's no use. What inheritance? Talk fast. Why did you want to poison my daughter? Sophia got up from her stool. I'll tell you everything. Just promise me you won't go to the police. Is everything I said true? You may not believe me. You can blame me, hate me, yell, scream, but I can't leave Mark alone. If anything happens to me, it'll be the end of him and me. Sophia, you're blackmailing us now, trying to put some of the blame on us. It's not my fault that you and my father had such a life, and that Mark became like that to me and my mom. In case you've forgotten, he abandoned us too. But unlike you, I don't blame anyone for my troubles. Cindy came right up to the woman. I have no pity for you. Tell it like it is now, and don't try to tell a lie from a local parent. I can smell a lie a mile away, Vanessa added. Okay, Sophia went to the window and began nervously stroking the curtains. Alex had a close friend who was a lawyer. He asked him to make a will with special conditions. In case of Alex's death, everything will go to Mark and me. But if his own daughter showed up, everything would automatically go to her. This apartment, the car, the garage, and what's in the safety deposit box. I don't know what's in there. Alex died 3 years ago. His parents died a year before him. Is that what this is about? Vanessa sat in the chair again. That's it. I see the inheritance on the inheritance charts coming out, and you just decided to get rid of me for the apartment and the car. Cindy, I couldn't help the tears that came in. You ruined your mother's gypsy and our whole life. Sophia cried. I gave so much love to Alex nursing him when he got sick. And what in return? To go begging with my son in his old age. Cindy's dear mother cut the woman short. Have you ever tried earning your own money? You haven't earned anything yourself in all these years. The girl began to peel the fruit with all her might, all around for a splash of juice. Such a mixture of feelings Cindy had probably never experienced before. The feeling of euphoria and happiness from what she heard was replaced by heartbreak. Why hadn't she looked before? Why didn't she go anywhere? Maybe it was because she had been beaten into her head since childhood that her mother was dead and there was no one to look for. Did the people around the girl know the true state of affairs, or did they deliberately want to protect Cindy from unnecessary worry and suffering? How could she believe them? Why had there never been a similar circumstance with poisoning? She wouldn't even have had the thought that it was possible to address to the director of the orphanage, to the archives, to the passport office. There's lots of other places. Yeah, even people like Betty. The feeling of resentment at herself and dissatisfaction with the reception, which gave hope and more questions, turned into a severe headache. Arriving at the apartment, Cindy immediately popped a pill and fell into a dream. The next morning was no less interesting than yesterday. No sooner had the girl woken up and picked up her phone than she saw 8 missed calls. Anna Cindy had set the phone on silent and silent mode since the evening, so that no one would disturb her while she was at Madame Cindy's. Without hesitation, she immediately dialed the superintendent's number. Anna, hello. What's wrong? I haven't turned in some reports. The girl's voice sounded confident and even rude. Cindy, I'm sorry to bother you. It's just the new employee quit. She got scared, I guess. We've had a non-stop incident. It's a long explanation. Could you come to work? Anna, come out for a while or something. You know, I don't even know what to do. Maybe she'll come to her senses and come back. I mean, you're ready to shut me out again. Like there's someone better on the horizon? Cindy, it's definitely you I'm talking to. Anna, don't be sarcastic. I worked at your pharmacy for 2 years, and you fired me just because I didn't push expensive American vitamins on your customers. Expensive American vitamins, although I was selling our excellent vitamins with no worse composition. There was an awkward silence on the other end of the line. If you want to go to work, I have a few conditions for you. You must let me work in peace and not poke me for every pill not sold. And the second is that I get the same bonus as the other employees. I get the most customers on my shifts. And I'm not just meeting sales targets, I'm meeting them. Cindy, do you understand what you just said? I don't just understand, Anna. I'll tell you more than that. You've been taking advantage of me all this time and acting not like a professional, but like a person who only cares about profit. How many uncertified drugs have passed over your counter? How many people have you forced to offer those drugs to? And if any of them got hurt, Cindy, the voice of the superintendent, a hustler, come to work today. I'll agree to your terms. Take it easy. Everything will be fine. Anna, I've already got some important things planned for today. But tomorrow, I'll be able to go on the second shift. Would you be so kind as to have the paperwork done by the time I get there so I can get to work right away? Okay, Cindy. We'll be waiting for you. Cindy put the cell phone on the nightstand and sat on the bed dumbfounded by her boldness and non-toxicity. So that's how it works, not being nice to everyone all the time. Maybe Betty is right about swinging her kindness at everyone, though I won't jump to conclusions. My restraint has at least saved my life. But being braver is definitely something to be brave about. An hour later, Cindy was at the police station near the pharmacy where she worked. "Hello." Cindy walked up to the front desk window and leaned in. "I've made a good living. Once upon a time. But I told you I got sick. And with a disease like mine, not many people will hire me. Especially if it's a catering business." Alex knew how dependent we were on him, and still left us penniless. But that's your personal problem. Lady, they don't concern us. Tell me, where is this notary sitting? Vanessa is heading for the door. You'll get everything, Cindy, even without a trial. You just have to show proof of parentage. Sophia Mark knows about all this. No, he doesn't, so he won't understand why I made him marry you. He would have broken up with you a long time ago. I've been holding him back. I thought I could settle the matter with a little blood. But he's completely out of hand. Oh, that's it. And I thought you were with him. The girl was breathing hard. I thought he was treating me like that because he wanted to get rid of me too. But it turns out he just doesn't like me. It's easier than I thought. Daughter, let's go. There's nothing to do here. Yes, Mom, let's go. Cindy followed Vanessa, but stopped by Mark's mother. I'm not excusing my father, but I believe he had his reasons to do this to you. Of course, I'll do all the tests I need to and take whatever I'm legally owed. And thank you so much for doing this for me, by the way. Talking on the phone about the poisoning. For raising a son who is incapable of love. For telling the truth. Cindy, I really hope that for my heartfelt confession you won't deprive Mark and I of our only home. I really hope, Sophia, that you didn't poison my father with mushrooms when you heard those special terms of the will. And as scary as it sounds, no one has canceled the exhumation of the body. Cindy and Vanessa walked out of the apartment and slammed the door shut. Sophia froze in mute question. She didn't even have time to object or take offense. But Cindy's statement, this once quiet and girl, uncomplainingly bore all her nagging and scrubbed to a shine all the corners. Once it had been her and Mark's apartment. Now the woman was dumbfounded at how confident Cindy had become in the past 2 weeks. How easily she had brought her out. How deftly her experienced. For all intents and purposes, a man pinned against the wall. These 2 gypsies she had miscalculated. She had unthinkably miscalculated. Sophia sat down on the floor and cried. August 12 was very hot. Fallen in the greenery dacha plot in the village. Hospitably received guests at a round wooden table under the latest apple trees. Sat 5 people and drank tea with a huge pie. Ethan, thank you for helping us. Cindy led her guests down to a mug of tea. Oh, really, Cindy? The law was on your side. I was just scaring your frustrated fiancé. He really went to court in a frenzy, didn't he? He thought they'd believe him right away. I still feel bad about how low people can be. Accusing me and my mom of attacking Sophia. That I met Mark on purpose to steal my inheritance from them. No, they probably wouldn't even make a movie like that. No, sis, they won't. Peter took a bite out of the apple. If it wasn't for Ethan, it'd be over. I'd be sunning myself on a bunk somewhere right now. Don't say that. Vanessa intervened. What are you talking about? And in general, you need to think about what to do now. He's been sunbathing in the country for 3 months. Peter, he's planted a lot of beds. We'll eat vegetables all winter without looking in the stores. Cindy stood up for her brother. Oh, my daughter, I'm just embarrassed in front of our defense counsel. That's how they fought for Peter in court. I didn't even think anyone would stand up for my son. Who are we? Gypsies with no ancestry? Vanessa, I didn't do it for free, first of all. And secondly, I was so struck by your story that I couldn't do otherwise. The lawyer looked at the girl. By the way, Cindy, were you dating that Betty woman? Yes, I did. She's very happy for me and tried to tell me something else. She says nice, but I stopped her. I never want to know what the future holds for me again. So Cindy Maria's coworker put her cell phone on the table and got ready to talk. Let's be honest. If you, Cindy, hadn't accidentally settled in with me and picked up that African, who knows how things would have gone? Yeah, if I hadn't agreed to fill in for you then, how things would have been." The girl laughed and stroked a little rounded belly Maria. "And in general, girls," Vanessa began quietly, "there are a lot of these ifs in life. But someone was let down by greed and thirst for profit. We gypsies are often accused of that, for example. But you can't put everyone in the same category. After that incident with you, Cindy," the woman lowered her eyes, "I tried to live honestly, so my prayers were answered. Let's not talk about sad things. Cindy, why don't you tell us about yours? Or something funny? You've got tons of stories." "Hash, the last thing I want to talk about is work. Too many events fell to the share of an ordinary pharmacist of the pharmacy panacea." Cindy has a better smile. "I'll tell you what the letter I found in the safety deposit box says." "It's a letter from your father, Alex?" Peter asked timidly. "Yes, from my father. I won't start from the beginning. It's very personal at the beginning, and only a few lines from the middle." Cindy took out a large folded piece of paper from her bag, which was lying beside the chair. "I hope you have chosen a serious profession, daughter. Maybe it's a doctor, maybe it's a teacher. Maybe you chose a profession like my mom as a pharmacist. But just know that whatever you do, I'm sure you'll succeed. There are many professions in the world. Just pick something you like." The girl is silent. "Wow," Maria got up from her chair. "So your father suggested that you might be a pharmacist. That's quite a coincidence." "Yes, I'm shocked at the coincidence myself." Cindy put the letter back in her bag. "So my daddy dreamed of me being a pilot, and I became a lawyer. What am I supposed to do now? Retrain myself?" Ethan humorously sank in. "No, you don't have to retrain." Vanessa patted the table with his palm. "Do you have to get married?" Everyone laughed. "I'm all for it." The lawyer looked fondly at Cindy. "I've chosen a case to my liking, and I want to choose the other half to my liking too." "Oh, you've embarrassed me." Cindy waved, and black curls themselves in the rapids of the apples will throw down. "Come on, eat faster than the fields. We'll eat any of your pies. It's so good. Even Mom doesn't cook." Peter winked at his mother and took an appetizing bite of apple pie. "I'm glad, my family." Cindy looked at her family and smiled. "Finally, my pies are starting to taste good."
Subscribe and click the bell.
Betty looked out of the cab window at the cityscapes running by and smiled. She was on her way home from the airport, her business trip unexpectedly postponed. The chief had called her boss, with whom Betty was already preparing to go through passport control, and informed her that there was no need to fly anywhere today. "Let's go home." Clara, the chief accountant of their company, ordered. "Today we rest. Tomorrow I'll see you at the office." Betty couldn't believe her sudden good fortune. A whole free day, and Mason, just at home, took a vacation for a week, and daughter Molly flew with her parents to Miami. Finally, she and her husband would have some alone time. They needed it so badly. After all, lately both of them catastrophically do not have enough time for each other. But before it was different. Compliments, admiring glances, walks, romantic acts, surprises without reason, and talk about everything in the world. When did it change? With the birth of her daughter, or with Betty's going to work after a prolonged maternity leave? The woman couldn't remember the exact moment when Mason began to drift apart. It seemed to have been going on for about 3 years. Betty missed her spouse's jokes, attention, and care. She sincerely missed her formerly loving husband. The mere sight of him made a woman feel loved and attracted. Of course, Betty understood. Mason has a serious job. He often has to fly to Boston, where their company opened a large branch 4 years ago. He practically lives there, sometimes staying for weeks at a time, tired. It's understandable that he doesn't have time for romance. No, Mason honestly fulfilled all the duties of a husband and father, provided their family with everything they needed, spent his free time with his daughter, never gave up household chores. Yet Betty realized it was time for a change. She wanted that warmth back. This free day to spend alone with her husband was just the right thing to do. It would be good for their relationship, as if fate itself were helping them. Betty quietly opened the door with her key. She wanted the effect of surprise, to see her husband's surprised and delighted face. She tiptoed into the hallway. From their bedroom came Mason's quiet voice. He was on the phone, probably being disturbed from work again. He often received calls and texts, even at night, and on weekends or holidays, he could easily be called to the office or to the site. What can you do? He was an important person in a large construction company. But the paycheck was right. Betty was not the kind of wife who threw tantrums at her busy husband, demanding attention. She understood that her husband was trying for the sake of their family, even felt sorry for him, and was grateful to him for this work, and was proud of such a busy and irreplaceable husband. And now the woman did not interfere with Mason, lurked at the front door and decided to let him finish his conversation and then discover his arrival. But her husband's tone was strange, clearly non-businesslike. Betty involuntarily listened to the words. "Sweetheart, but I'll make a deal. They'll give you a few days of rest, come." Why would I pass up a chance like that? "Don't worry, I'll take care of everything. I'll buy you tickets, of course, but when else will it happen that my wife will go on a business trip for a week? She rarely goes on business trips, and then there's my daughter at the sea. Jenna, you wanted to see the Capitol. I'll give you a tour." Betty couldn't believe her ears. Is this really happening to her? Her husband is now cooing with some lady and even calling her over to their place while his wife is away on business. Mason has a mistress. Betty really wanted to explain the overheard conversation to herself in a different way, but her imagination was clearly lacking for a different version. And what else could she do to justify all this? Sunshine. "Come here. My wife's on a business trip." Mason almost cooed into the phone, speaking tenderly and affectionately. He hasn't spoken to his wife like that in a long time. Apparently, the unfamiliar Jenna had decided to come to New York after all. That's great. Mason was sincerely happy. "I'll meet you at the airport. I have such plans. We'll have a great time." Yeah, whatever you want." "Oh, you're so beautiful. I'm looking forward to it, too." The conversation seemed to be coming to an end. Betty crept back to the door on shaky legs and slipped out onto the landing. She decided not to show Mason that she had heard him on the phone with someone named Jenna, a beauty by the looks of it. At least that's what he called her. Yes, Betty had no doubts about the superior looks of Mason's date. Her husband had always been an aesthete. The woman entered the apartment a second time. Now she purposely slammed the door loudly, signaling her presence. Mason stepped out into the hallway. Betty watched carefully as the confusion, surprise, and disappointment in his eyes was gradually replaced by amazed joy. Her husband had always been excellent at self-control. Now he quickly pulled himself together. If Betty had not heard this conversation, she would not have noticed that her arrival was not a happy news for her husband. "You're back," he smiled broadly. Mason was good at hiding his frustration at the lurking plans. "What kind of actor?" "Rescheduled a business trip," Betty replied. Her heart was pounding furiously, and her head was starting to hurt. "Were you upset about it?" Mason asked. "You're just not wearing your face. I felt sick in the cab." Betty lied. "I want to lie down." She went to the bedroom and, without undressing, fell in their big bed, trying not to think about the fact that perhaps her husband was planning to invite his mistress here. How could this be? They had been through so much together, had traveled so long and hard to build their prosperous, happy family, and had overcome all the difficulties together, shoulder to shoulder, always supporting each other, so many small and big victories behind them. Periodically, Betty would learn that the husband of one of her colleagues or friends had a mistress. Outraged and certain that it would definitely never happen in her family. And now this conversation. Her head ached, growing increasingly nauseous. Mason, seeing his wife lying pale and in a state of flux, was alarmed and brought her painkillers and a cold compress to her forehead. Had it not been for the overheard conversation, Betty would now be glad of such care. But then she wouldn't have been sick, either, because she'd been overexcited and her blood pressure had skyrocketed. Pressing her fingers to her temples so that the headache was easier to bear, Betty thought back to her and Mason's acquaintance. It had been a fun, carefree college time. The girl was relaxing in a club, in the company of classmates. There she had been noticed by him, a charming fellow with a wide, white-toothed smile, witty and cheerful, who could dance, unlike Betty herself. What a handsome boy! Kelly remarked, a childhood friend. Lucky you, don't miss out. And Betty? Yes, Mason was a prince, but right now she just wanted to have fun with her friends. She had no plans for romance, much less a serious relationship. Only recently Betty had hardly got rid of her ex-boyfriend, obsessive and constantly demanding attention. And now the girl was enjoying her freedom. The admiration in Mason's eyes was pleasing to Betty's ego. She liked his compliments and touches. He obviously hoped to continue communication outside the club, even took Betty's phone number. However, she had changed some numbers on purpose, as she often did. The girl did not plan a second meeting, so she tried to enjoy communication with a handsome guy here and now. And then their student company decided to go to another club, closer to the house where Betty lived. The girl said goodbye to her new acquaintance, who was upset by this news. Mason then gently took her narrow palm in his, kissed her hand gallantly, and said, I'll call you back. I really liked you. You're so beautiful, so special. I won't let you go. Betty smiled. She felt like a real princess at that moment. The girl was always popular with the opposite sex. She had what is called a model appearance. Tall, slender, long-legged, her shiny brown hair falling below her shoulders, and emerald green eyes, regularly received admiring glances and compliments, and each time it was very gratifying. As she did now, Betty smiled sweetly at Mason, whom she thought she would never meet again. And she got into the overcrowded car of her classmates, where her friends were already waiting for her. The merry company drove through the night streets of her hometown for a long time. The students laughed, sang their favorite songs, made plans for the approaching summer, and Betty, to her surprise, couldn't stop thinking about Mason. It wasn't the first time she'd given a guy the wrong phone number, only now she regretted it for some reason. And she felt guilty about lying to her new acquaintance. The first person Betty saw when they pulled up to the club was Mason. It turned out he had taken a cab and followed their car and was now walking toward her smiling and open arms. The girl hurried toward the guy with joy and relief. How lucky was it that he had guessed to do this? She was afraid they would never meet again. With Mason, Betty had always been fun. He knew exactly how to cheer her up and make her laugh. Next to him, she felt safe from everything in the world and very loved. She realized that if she needed him, Mason would do everything possible and impossible for her. And it was very pleasant. And Mason had somehow gained authority among Betty's friends, which was very important to her. And this could not but make the girl proud of her for such a witty and communicative young man. He, like Betty, was a student, a third-year student, but he was studying at another university, an architectural and construction university, and was already working part-time for a friend of his father's. Betty, on the other hand, was fully immersed in her studies. Her parents offered her to enter the University of Economics to study accounting. The girl didn't mind. By the end of the 11th grade, she had no special preferences. An accountant, so an accountant. Vacancies will not be difficult to find later. Accountants are required everywhere. But Mason really loved everything about architecture and could talk about his work for hours. Betty loved to listen to his stories and look into the enthusiastic eyes of her favorite person. She had no doubt Mason would be a great success in life. In their 4th year, the couple decided to consummate their relationship. They were sure of their feelings for each other. "I've found my destiny. It's you," said Mason one day. "I want to be with you all the time, not date you a few times a week. I want to fall asleep and wake up next to you. So what if we're still students? I don't want to wait too long to get married." Betty was happy, smiling. She felt the same way. The prospect of becoming Mason's wife and always being by his side was breathtaking. But parents on both sides actively opposed the ideas of the young ones, motivated by quite logical facts. Both are still studying. On their feet did not become, there is nowhere to live. Where to hurry? Meet and get married later, when you've finished your studies and found a job. And then Betty thought of telling her parents that she was expecting a child. So her mom and dad and her future mother-in-law quickly organized a wedding. "That's a lie, of course," said Mason. "But what can you do if they need a good reason?" "It's their own fault," agreed Betty. "Well, what if it's true? What if we really have a baby?" Mason suggested, "I really want us to have a baby. I'm already working. We'll live in my grandmother's empty apartment. I'll finish university. I'll be made the head of the department at once. The chief has already promised me a place, so I'll feed us." "That's a great idea." Betty was happy. She suddenly realized that she really wanted a child from the man she loved. It would be the happiest and most beautiful baby in the world. But for some reason, the attempts of the young ones were not successful. The cherished pregnancy did not come. True, then this young married couple did not particularly care. And without that in life was a lot of interesting parties, friends, studies, traveling. When the newlyweds admitted to their parents that there was no child, they didn't even get angry. By that time, adults sincerely loved the second halves of their children and considered their decision to get married a correct and responsible step. They only laughed at the ingenuity of Betty and Mason and hoped that they would not delay their grandchildren. And then, finally, the diploma. Betty and her husband are now young professionals. Mason, as promised, was promoted to department head. Betty got a job as a bookkeeper at the mall. Now they were making their own money for a living. Not much, of course, yet, but their parents continued to help out as a matter of habit. So they had enough not only for food and utilities, but also for fun. "How good you are." Kelly, Betty's friend, admired her. "You've done so well in life." "I don't believe in fairy tales about early marriages falling apart. But I've been dumped by a guy again, and all I get are assholes." Betty sincerely pitied the woman who had failed in her personal life and thanked fate for sending her such a faithful, loving, reliable man as Mason. Her friends and coworkers were constantly complaining about their boyfriends and husbands. During these conversations, Betty felt a little awkward. She couldn't keep the conversation going, for she had nothing to reproach Mason with. Time passed. The newlyweds gradually managed to establish a household. Mason and Betty were homeschooled children, cared for by their parents, so household chores were a challenge for both of them at first. It turned out that Betty's long hair quickly clogs the drain, dishes do not wash themselves, dust in the corners accumulates incredibly quickly, and regularly ordered food in the restaurant, hurts the family budget. The newlyweds were in for many such surprises. It got to the point that Betty, going to prepare dinner, typed in a search engine phrase, "Where can I get red water for borscht?" The couple withstood the test of everyday life with dignity. Both quickly enough learned to cook and clean, and even made repairs independently in the apartment. Their marriage was waiting for another test of durability. They were married for 5 years, and the family still had no children. Even Kelly managed to give birth to a son. However, she raised her Ethan alone now. His father considered himself too young for such responsibility and disappeared in an unknown direction. But Betty was still almost envious of her friend, looking at her miracle, a tiny cute little baby boy, and desperately dreamed of her own baby. Mason, too, was eager to be a father. The hospitalizations began. Betty was diagnosed with serious reproductive problems. Medications, ultrasounds, tests, treatments. All this exhausts both mentally and physically, but for the sake of her dream, the girl did not give up. Mason was by her side and supported her spouse in everything. Probably, this is our punishment for lying to our parents then, as if we were expecting a child. Betty sighed sorrowfully, looking at another negative pregnancy test. Come on, we meant well, and we didn't do anything wrong. And don't get upset. Everything will work out. But it didn't. When all possible treatments had been tried, the doctor recommended echo. Betty and Mason were sure they would soon be parents. But 3 tries and no success. Betty lay on the bed and just stared at the ceiling. There was no more strength left to cry. She realized she was never going to be a mother. It was all useless, and she didn't want to torture her own body, to hope again and then be disappointed. And then Mason came up. "Shall we try again?" He said, "Only once. I read the forums. Some people only get it on the 8th, 9th try. We're on our 4th. Let's do it. 4th try, and that's it. If we fail again, we'll take a kid from the orphanage. Do you agree?" Betty jumped up on the bed. She once suggested her husband to look at orphan profiles, but he flatly refused. He wanted a child of his own blood. He didn't want to raise a stranger's son or daughter, but Betty didn't care. She dreamed of giving love and warmth to a tiny, defenseless human being, even if not born by her. This desire overshadowed all others, filled the woman's thoughts. Mason remained adamant. He argued about bad genetics, the difficulties of adaptation. He didn't want another man's child, and he had every right to. Betty accepted his opinion. So her husband offers to take the baby from the orphanage, but before that he asks for another chance at a native hair. Of course, this time Betty happily agreed to the echo. She was going to the procedure in a completely different mood. One way or another, soon her cherished dream will come true. She will become a mother. It is not known what played a major role, the new therapy or Betty's positive attitude. But it wasn't until this 4th time that everything worked out. Betty looked at the 2-strike test and cried with happiness. And soon Mason joined her. The pregnancy was difficult. Betty was often hospitalized. Mason completely took over the household and almost blew the dust off his wife. He honored her every request, anticipated her every wish, even asked her to quit her job. "You don't need to go there now. Nerves unnecessary waste. Rest better, have a baby, grow up a little, and find you a new job. My salary is enough for everything, and next year I'll be promoted." Betty happily plunged into the life of a housewife. A beloved, loving husband, a cozy new apartment, and soon there will be a baby. What more do you need to be happy? "Oh, Betty, you are a clever woman. You have organized your life so well." My friend Kelly, who often came to visit, said approvingly. "Not like me, a single mother who is torn between work and my son." Ethan was already in first grade. Kelly did look tired, thin, anxious, always in a hurry. "There's a reason I told you at the club. Don't let him get away. He's a great guy." "Remember what I said?" "I do." Betty agreed. She'd texted Mason the wrong phone number that night, and if he hadn't followed them to the club, none of this would be happening now. It's scary to imagine. And then Molly was born. There was no limit to the happiness of the young parents and the newfound grandparents. Now their family became even stronger and happier. True, Betty, after a long treatment, difficult pregnancy, and childbirth, began to have problems with blood pressure. She often felt ill. Mason in these moments perfectly coped with the baby, bathed his daughter, fed her from a bottle, entertained the baby, even swaddled the newborn. And he was just as good at it as Betty. Molly grew up bright and active, but very sickly. She often caught colds and bronchitis in the garden, so Betty had to delay going to work. The maternity leave dragged on until her daughter was 5, and then Kelly invited her best friend to her firm. There was just a vacancy, so the women became colleagues. Life fell into place. Molly was already a first grader. Betty worked. Mason became the head of a large branch of his company, which was located in Boston. There were no money problems. Her husband provided for the family. Betty thought their relationship was perfect. Yes, there wasn't much romance anymore. Sometimes it was very lacking. But after all, they had been together for so many years, it was normal. The main thing was trust, reliability, mutual support. And now this conversation. Betty felt like she couldn't handle the pressure. It seemed to her that these health problems were in the past. Then after giving birth, Mason found the best doctors for her, the new mom got the right therapy, and she forgot about the headaches for years. But now such stress and they're back. By evening, Mason couldn't take it anymore and called his wife an ambulance. She was diagnosed with hypertension and taken to the hospital. She had to lie down for about a week. During that time, the woman pulled herself together. She has no right to beat herself up like that. She has a small daughter and a beloved husband. Yes, he made a mistake, but Betty doesn't know the situation. Maybe it's Jenna, the unknown Jenna, who has tricked him around. Betty is not going to give up just like that. She's been building her strong, happy family for a long time. She and Mason have done everything possible and impossible together. And now she's gonna give her husband to some skank? No way. That's the last thing we need. Molly needs a father. She needs a reliable, caring husband. Betty will fight for her family. This decision gave the woman strength and vigor. There was plenty of time at the hospital to get busy searching for the beautiful stranger. Betty only knew her name so far, but in the age of social media, that was enough. First of all, the woman set about monitoring her husband's accounts. Mason had a lot of friends and subscribers, colleagues, friends, partners, just acquaintances. Jenna among them was enough. Betty rejected ladies of age immediately. Then it was the turn of women who did not reach the aesthetic tastes of her husband. Mason always preferred beautiful, slender, well-groomed girls like Betty herself. The remaining Jenna beauties from her husband's pages were 3. These young women didn't look too suspicious, all of them showing off their own happy families on social media. Their profiles were littered with photos of their other halves. Who knows who they are, though? It's not a fact that Mason's mistress is single. How many cases when married ladies decide to have a little fun and make a friend on the side? And yet Betty's intuition told her that Jenna wasn't one of them. Suddenly, the search engine gave Betty several accounts with a note. Perhaps you two know each other." Among them was Liam, a colleague of Mason's from the Boston branch. In the main profile photo, he was clearly posing from a corporate event, with their company logo in the background. Betty was interested. Her husband had never shown her pictures from the parties he'd flown to Boston for. He said he wasn't interested in collecting that garbage, and he hated being photographed. And now Betty wanted to see how their corporate holidays were going. If Liam had put a photo from the party on the cover, he'd probably have a couple more on his profile. Betty went to the page of her husband's colleague, and as she expected, he had a whole album of photos from corporate parties. The woman started flipping through the photos with interest. She noticed her husband in some of them. He seemed to be deliberately hiding from the cameras, and the photographer managed to capture only a glimpse of him, in a half-turn or from the back. Betty smiled. Mason hadn't liked to be photographed since he was a child. His mother had told me a funny story about it, but it wasn't long before the woman wasn't laughing. The next photo featured the three of them, Liam, Mason, and a beautiful, bright young woman with chiseled facial features. Betty's husband stood in the center. The lady was clinging to him in an overly possessive way, and he was naturally and habitually putting his arm around her slim waist. Something wasn't right here. Betty shifted her eyes downward. Each of the characters in the photos were labeled Mason and Jenna. Jenna. Betty seemed to have accidentally stumbled upon the one she was looking for. The woman quickly navigated to the girls' page. There were many pictures of her. The beauty clearly loved being photographed. You bet, with such appearance, just a supermodel. Jenna at a resort. Jenna in a luxurious restaurant. Jenna in the pool, and everywhere alone. How could a hottie like Jenna be alone? She can't be. I bet she's got a lot of dates. And suddenly Betty saw a picture from the sea. It was obviously some foreign resort. White sand, bright sunshine, palm trees, turquoise waves. Jenna was photographing the beautiful landscape. In the frame, apparently, accidentally got a man. He stood with his back to the lens. But Betty recognized her husband, his figure, the birthmark on his neck, and the t-shirt that she herself gave him. There was no doubt. This was the same Jenna her husband had called to New York for her business trip. The same mistress. And they're serious. They're even traveling to the sea together. Mason must have explained those trips to her as business trips, of which he'd had too many lately. Well, at least now Betty knows the enemy. Jenna was in her final year of university when she met Mason. It happened in a bar where she and a classmate were celebrating the end of the session. A handsome young man in an expensive business suit was relaxing at a neighboring table with a few friends, or rather colleagues. Those two were dressed in strict jackets and pants. Businessmen, probably. Christina, Jenna's dorm roommate and classmate, looked at them. They're all so cool. Come on, they're old for us, and they're probably married. Just let me dream. So cool, well-groomed, not like our guys. Continued to admire Christina. Having a couple of glasses of wine, she always became kinder to the opposite sex. Every man seemed to her almost a prince on a white horse. But the men in this nearby company did look attractive. Stylish, trim, handsome. One of them stood out in particular, gray-eyed, with a wide, white-toothed smile that made dimples appear on his cheeks. Jenna tried not to look in his direction. Look, they're looking at us, Christina said admiringly. Of course, you yourself do not take your eyes off them. So they look at you and are surprised. Calm down. Jenna, they are coming to us. Indeed, soon one of the men, not the one Jenna liked, came to their table. He introduced himself as Liam and asked Christina to dance with him. She gladly agreed. Jenna finished her cocktail and watched the dancing of her friend, who, apparently, decided to get closer to the beau by all means. But another man, the oldest of the group, with an expensive watch on his arm and stylish glasses, separated from the table. "Good evening." He introduced himself, taking a seat next to Jenna. "What is it that such a beautiful girl is sad here alone?" What a banal approach. From the representative of the older generation, Jenna expected something original. "I'm not sad about being alone. I'm enjoying it." The girl not too subtly hinted at being left alone, but the newfound admirer did not give up. "My name is James," he introduced himself. "I just can't resist your beauty." "You look like a young Nicole Kidman. Has anyone ever told you that?" "More than once." "Can I ask you your name?" "No, you don't have to say no so flatly. You just don't realize you're missing out on a great opportunity I could give you. Give me some peace for starters." Jenna was getting annoyed. That Christina, she is there on the dance floor with her handsome man, and she has to fight off an obsessive suitor who does not understand neither hints nor direct refusals. James, meanwhile, had moved closer to Jenna, and he was drunk. That partly explained his lack of judgment. Surely in ordinary life, this man is tactful and intelligent. Some people shouldn't drink at all. They turn into such animals. James put his hand on the back of Jenna's chair and looked at the girl with admiring eyes. It was unpleasant. She stood up, intending to leave, but the man held her hand, his palm firmly around her wrist. "Where are you going? We haven't even met yet." "I have to go. I'll walk you out." James jumped up from his seat. He never let go of my hand. "Let me go already." Jenna shouted loudly. He didn't think to loosen his grip. Perhaps he couldn't hear or understand what he was saying, the cocktails playing no small part in his behavior. James, instead of letting go of Jenna, suddenly hugged her. It was too much. The girl moved as hard as she could at the insolent man, her elbow right into his soft belly, and he awed and opened his arms for a moment. The man's eyes flashed with malice. It frightened the girl. Anything could be expected from a drunken stranger. She tried to slip away, but he grabbed her again. This time roughly and very tightly. Jenna felt pain. "We need to talk. Sit down," James asked. "James, what are you doing?" "Calm down." The gray-eyed man approached them. Fortunately, he noticed what was going on at the table and rushed to help, either to rescue his friend from possible trouble or to protect the girl. For some reason, Jenna immediately felt safe and realized that everything was going to work out. Why would she? James' speech became more and more incoherent. Two other men from the company came up to them and took the clueless comrade to their table. "You excuse him." The gray-eyed one smiled. "I had a little too much to drink, and today the deal was closed, so here's a note." "Thank you," replied Jenna. She couldn't take her eyes off the man's beautiful, intelligent eyes. The girl just drowned in them. He looked even more attractive up close than he looked from afar. For some reason, she wanted to run her hand over his cheeks, touched with light stubble. That had never happened to her before. Jenna painfully invented an excuse to prolong communication with the gray-eyed man. She did not want to part with him. Fate had taken pity on her, and everything had worked itself out. And Mason, Liam and Christina, who had been dancing, came to the table. "Come on, land here. Look how cool the girls are." Christina laughed foolishly with adoration, looking at her beau. Mason stayed at the table, and Jenna realized it was because of her. A hot wave ran through her whole body. She was drawn to Mason more and more, like a magnet pulling her. Mason was a very interesting and witty conversationalist. He seemed to be able to hold a conversation on any topic, and Jenna wanted to agree with his opinions every time. She wished the evening would never end. It was unlikely that she would ever meet this man who had such a strange influence on her again. From the table conversations, the girl realized that he lives and works in Boston and came here on a business trip. Mason, to Jenna's disappointment, did not even try to get her phone number. Most likely he is married, and he does not need a relationship on the side. Yes, the girl felt that she liked Mason, and it was very pleasant, but he behaved as restrained as possible, not showing his sympathy in any way. Jenna hoped that she did not give away her sudden feelings either. Until now, she hadn't understood what passion, love, and other concepts from romantic books and movies meant. It seemed to her that all of these were fictitious categories, that they didn't really exist, but now she was in a whirlpool of feelings, and she had no idea what to do with it all. The evening was rapidly drawing to a close. The bar closes at 200 hours. Christina and Liam decided to take a cab and go for a walk. They called Masana and Jenna, but the man refused at once, saying that he had an important meeting in the afternoon. Jenna thought of some reason not to go with the couple. When Christina and Liam drove off into the night, Mason offered to walk Jenna home. Her heart raced. Was what had been dreamed of all evening really happening? She'd really hit it off, and they'd start a relationship. Without witnesses, he would finally dare to take a step towards her. His heart fluttered in joyful anticipation. In the cab, the girl waited for Mason to kiss her, or at least to embrace her, but he again behaved a little aloofly, though he joked and smiled a lot. And already on the porch of the student dormitory, he took Jenna's phone number. She gladly dictated the numbers to him and realized that from that moment, she would live in anticipation of a call. It didn't take long to wait. Mason called the very next day, invited to the movie. After the movie, they walked along the waterfront, then stopped by a luxurious restaurant. Jenna had been living in Boston for 5 years, but she had no idea that there were such places here. She felt a little uncomfortable, but Mason helped her relax, just covered her hand with his palm, and all the anxiety, worry, awkwardness disappeared as if it had never happened. Then he offered to go to his place. Of course, Jenna knew what that meant, and Mason realized that she knew what she was getting into, so he didn't insist, gave her the right to choose. Jenna agreed without the slightest hesitation. The corporate apartment was as upscale and presentable as Mason himself, stylish, bright, spacious, modern, and clearly designed by a designer. Jenna didn't realize whether the company had bought the apartment for Mason or whether it was just renting it to an employee, because the latter was often in Boston. That's how they started dating. That first night, the couple was cozy on the couch in the living room. Mason suggested Jenna not to go to the hostel at night, but to stay with him. The girl gladly accepted the invitation. She did not want to part with Mason. And here they were watching some show on TV and eating rolls ordered from the restaurant, drinking insanely delicious champagne. Finally, the girl decided on an important question, which did not give her a rest. "And you, were you married?" she asked. "Yes, does it matter?" Jenna thought for a moment. On the one hand, it really didn't matter. She feels happy around Mason. She wants to see the face and smell the smell of the man she loves, to feel his touch and bathe in his admiration and care, and to be a part of his beautiful life. Yes, Jenna wasn't lying to herself. She liked that Mason was so successful and wealthy, but that wasn't the only thing that attracted her to him. Far from it. And the wife, she was somewhere far away, New York. What did it matter if she even existed or not? On the other hand, Jenna realized that it is not good to have an affair with a married man. It is always a betrayal, and the outcome is often sad, even tragic sometimes. The girl herself many times lectured her friend Christina when she was too fond of unfree men. And yet, still Mason attracted Jenna, charmed, mesmerized. For the sake of being near him, she was ready to go over all her principles and moral turmoil. After all, Jenna is not going to take him out of the family, at least not until she is enough to feel, at least sometimes as a woman, this strong, confident, and intelligent man. Mason has shown Jenna a very different life. The girl came to Boston to study from the village, and it took a long time to get used to the city. There was a time when she was even shy to go with her classmates to cheap cafes and eateries. In her village, she did not see anything like that. Such places seemed to her too luxurious. She felt in them some lost and ridiculous. Gradually, Jenna settled in Boston. It was easier and more fun to adapt with her roommate, Christina, a country girl like her. Looking at other students and following their advice, Jenna learned to dress and make up so as to favorably emphasize the advantages of her appearance. And movie halls, cafes, and bars soon stopped scaring her. Boys, students, and even teachers began to pay attention to Jenna. The girl realized the power of her beauty, but was not in a hurry to use it to the fullest, not like Christina, who seemed to try to take from her freshness and youth all at once. Jenna, however, having seen different stories in her village and in the city too, had made up her mind. First she would study, get on her feet, and then she would organize her personal life, surely with a worthy and successful man. They will have a wonderful family, a perfect one. Jenna will never again live in the poverty of her childhood, and she will not return to her village. On the contrary, she will bring her mother and brother here. The girl had global plans, and she confidently went to the goal. She studied at her pedagogical university, but she did not plan to work as a teacher of biology and geography. She thought that after graduation, she would find something more prestigious and highly paid. Entering this department right after school, the girl did not think much about the prospects. She went to the place where she had enough points, and the competition was small. And now Mason appeared in her life, and with him, trips to restaurants, luxurious gifts, long conversations on interesting topics, vivid impressions, new acquaintances. Not even 2 months after the beginning of their relationship, as Mason offered Jenna to fly with him for a few days to Thailand, the girl with pleasure plunged into this beautiful sea fairy tale. Later such trips became quite frequent. Mason could easily explain his absence to the family by business trips and business trips. Jenna, on the other hand, tried not to think about the fact that her man had another life, a wife and a daughter in New York. Of course, she almost immediately looked through her lover's social networks and saw pictures of his wife. Beautiful, successful woman, quite harmoniously looked in a pair with imposing Mason. Together they looked just perfect. Jenna could not help but recognize this fact, although it hurt her. The girl didn't plan to fall in love with Mason, or anyone at all. She had other goals for now, but she couldn't help it. Even yesterday, Jenna was an ordinary student who often had to eat instant noodles for dinner, even with Christina sometimes sharing this treat. She counted a small scholarship and saved on everything, and today she knew by sight the staff of the most elite establishments in Boston. She herself now lived in the very Mason corporate apartment that had so delighted her, in a stylish studio, packed to the brim with tricked-out appliances, with a spacious bathtub. Jenna liked to lie in it with a flute of cold champagne, like the girls in the movies about the beautiful life. Mason flew to Boston every month, sometimes more than once. It was required by work issues, but Jenna suspected that his business trips became so frequent because of her too. The girl realized that Mason really took her very seriously, not as just another mistress. and he wasn't the type to change women like a glove. Jenna knew that this was Mason's first and only relationship on the side, and she could see that the man was very uncomfortable with the fact that he had to lie to his wife, but he couldn't give up on Jenna. When the girl graduated from the university, Mason got her a job in his branch in the Human Resources Department. Jenna had to learn a lot practically from scratch to master a new specialty, but she coped, and she liked the work very much. And the salary, almost every month coming with a solid bonus, and quite happy. The girl realized that without experience, right from the university bench, she would never have found a place with such a salary if not for Mason, and she was grateful to him for the opportunity to get on her feet. It was very important to her. Time passed in the company. Some of the employees, of course, began to speculate about the relationship between the branch manager and Jenna. They talked and got used to it. The girl cared little about it, but she realized that sooner or later some well-wisher would report everything to Mason's wife. And what would happen then? It was difficult to suppose, yet years passed, but everything remained the same. Perhaps the 1,000 miles separating New York and Betty was released from the hospital. She was now completely well, both physically and mentally. She realized that she would fight for the man she loved and for her family. This decision gave her strength and confidence, but Betty needed allies, no one but her faithful friend Kelly to tell her the details of the story. "What a mess," Kelly said thoughtfully after listening to Betty. The women were sitting in a coffee shop, not far from the office. It was the only place to get away from the ears of their co-workers. "Yes, these are pies. I never would have thought that about Mason, the perfect husband and father from the outside. The weird thing is, he's a really great husband and father. They've been together for 4 years, and I had no idea. With his schedule, it's no wonder, constantly on the road, it's easy to hide not just a mistress, but a second family. Well, what have you decided? How will you proceed?" "Fight for my husband," Betty replied confidently. "I want Mason to realize that I am worth more to him than he is, and that no young beauty is worth losing his family. I'd like to do it without Mason realizing that I know about his relationship." "So you don't have a specific plan?" Kelly clarified. "What kind of plan? I don't have a lot of information. I only know her name and that she works at the Boston branch, which is probably where Mason put her. But I've seen pictures of her, and she's very pretty. So we need more information." Kelly concluded. Betty really liked it, us. She realized she now had a solid support in the person of her best friend. "We do." Betty agreed, but where would she get that information? "I don't know any of Mason's colleagues in Boston. I can't even ask them. I have an idea." Kelly suddenly had an idea. "Really, what is it?" "Wait, I don't want to get your hopes up yet. I'll call you tonight." And her friend kept her promise. Indeed, called in the evening and outlined her simple, like all things brilliant plan. Kelly's brother had a friend who was an IT specialist. He helped Betty install a program that she could now use to control her husband's social networking and messenger accounts. "If you don't know me, I don't know you." Half jokingly, half seriously, the young man warned. Betty could now see all of her husband's correspondence with family and friends, co-workers, partners, but most importantly with her, with the young blue-eyed Jenna who had intruded into their family. Of course, the woman felt some remorse because she had so treacherously invaded the personal space of the man she loved. But on the other hand, he had done far worse to her. Betty quickly realizes that things between Jenna and Mason are quite serious. She lives in his corporate apartment, cooking him delicious dinners there when Mason flies to Boston on business. Apparently, she tries very hard, specifically looking for exquisite recipes, not like Betty herself. Work and a child take so much energy and time, so she has recently had enough only for pasta and sausages, and the apartment is often not cleaned. However, Mason has never once expressed dissatisfaction with the domestic moments. On the contrary, when time allowed him, he took care of household chores without any indulgence, but maybe he still lacked care and attention, Betty. With the arrival of the long-awaited child, the woman did indeed spend much less time with her husband. Perhaps what happened was her fault. No, that's the wrong way to think about it. It's not easy for her either. But it's not like she went looking for a comforting lover. Mason and Jenna occasionally flew together for vacations. Betty realized this from the correspondence, in which there were phrases like "when we were in Italy" or "resorts by the warm sea." We've been many times before. I want to try something new. Maybe the Scandinavian countries? Sounds like they've traveled halfway around the world. That was a shame. Betty was sympathetic to her husband's busy schedule. Yes, they didn't spend much time together, but the woman believed that her husband was working for the good of their family. And now it turned out that many of these business trips were just a cover for traveling with Jenna. Reading the correspondence, Betty realized a lot. This girl is really in love with Mason, and him, Jenna gives him what her husband cannot get in the family: passion, free time, vivid emotions, blind adoration. But if he was really ready to leave his wife for her, he would have done it already. Mason is clearly serious about Jenna, but apparently doesn't really love her. Except things can change. For example, the young mistress will give him a child, and then Mason will never leave them. Or anything else for that matter. Slowly Jenna can bind her man to herself, make him fall in love with himself. So she had to act decisively and as quickly as possible, but she couldn't come up with a plan. And Kelly couldn't offer any advice. "I'm a single mom. What kind of counselor am I?" she said, confused. "Just know that if you need my help, I'm always here for you." "Thank you. You've been so helpful. At least now I know the ins and outs of their relationship." "What's it like? How does it feel to know your husband's not going on a business trip?" But to her, it hurts, Betty admitted, but it's still better than being in the dark. Jenna had been thinking about starting her own business for a long time. She decided to try to open several dispensing centers of a popular online store. The girl thoroughly studied all the necessary information and made a business plan, but the accumulated funds were clearly not enough to start. Jenna was sure that Mason would gladly help her. He always supported all her endeavors and encouraged her development in any sphere. This time, too, Mason was pleased with the idea of a mistress. "That's a wonderful idea." He praised it. "And the direction is promising. With paperwork, if anything, I'll help. Only I do not have enough money." And Jenna voiced the missing amount, quite decent, but not astronomical for Mason. "I can't take out so much at once. I'll fly to New York. You remind me, I'll transfer it." As it was agreed, Jenna sent Mason a text message with a reminder about the money transfer. Her lover never refused her anything. The girl was used to it, so she had no doubt that now she would get what she wanted. But the message about crediting the funds did not come, and time was running out. It was necessary to pay rent, advertising, utilities, and purchase racks for storage. So Jenna texted Mason again, to which she received a reply that he was looking into the matter. Eventually, Mason called and informed her in a frustrated voice that it wasn't going to work out. His family urgently needed money for something. Jenna did not get into the details. The man promised that he would definitely help her next month. The girl leaned back in her chair. Now she clearly felt second best. The family needed money, and Mason had chosen his wife in this situation, easily and without the slightest doubt. Next to him, Jenna was used to feeling superior to everyone else. Perhaps she was even in love with this self-perception, but now the girl fully saw the disadvantages of her status. She is only a mistress. Not even entitled to take offense, Mason does so much for her as it is. Betty, of course, read a text message from Jenna in which the mistress reminded Mason that he promised to give her money for business development. That message both pleased and angered the woman. At the same time pleased by the fact that the girl apparently takes good advantage of her husband's opportunities. Mason cannot ignore this. He is far from being a fool. The easier it will be to convince him of the mercantile interest of the mistress, which against the background of sincere love and affection of his wife, will look especially ugly. And Betty was outraged that Jenna is too bossy with her husband's resources, and he, apparently, easily follows her lead. No way, Jenna. You're out of the family budget. That evening, Mason was late for work, and Betty had time to prepare a delicious dinner. Sitting at the table, her husband marveled at her culinary skills and praised the dishes. Better than a restaurant. Husband confessed. I'm glad you like it, smiled Betty. How was your day? The usual. It was fine. I've just had my Infiniti breakdown, Betty confessed. Infiniti? Mason was surprised. I just bought you a car a while ago. It's a good, reliable car. I'll send the mechanics over tomorrow. No need. I already took it to the service myself. It needs repair. Expensive. How much? And then Betty said an amount only a little less than what the mistress had asked. Mason stopped talking, thinking. Betty realized he was considering whether he could help both his wife and Jenna at the same time, and deciding who to sponsor first. A lot depended on his choice now, and his wife helped him make it. I need a car urgently. Molly has a competition soon, training every day. I can't miss it, and I have to travel a lot for work every day. You know we have locations all over the city. Mason immediately transferred the necessary amount of money to Betty at the table. And then a little later the woman read a message from her husband, in which he justified himself to Jenna. The mistress never received the promised funds. What pleased Betty most was the fact that Mason had chosen her over Jenna. After all, the mistress also had a good enough reason. She wanted to start her own business, and yet her husband had helped his wife. Jenna must have noticed that, and now she's suffering. Serves her right. Let her know her place. The money situation upset Jenna and even disappointed her, but she pulled herself together and life went on as usual. The following month, Mason did find the missing funds for her, and the girl started her business. She had a wise assistant and mentor in the person of her favorite man, so the experience was successful. Soon the invested money began to bring a good income. True, Jenna had more worries, but she even liked such business. She had no time and energy to think about her unenviable position as a mistress. She simply enjoyed Mason's presence in her life, his attention, his support, his patronage. She was still fascinated by his gray eyes, and she still melted at his touch as surely as she had on the first day of their acquaintance. Christmas was approaching, her favorite holiday since childhood. Jenna loved the scent of pine needles. She was mesmerized by the colorful lights, garlands. She was no longer a little girl, but as before, she associated the end of December with the expectation of a miracle, and this time the miracle really happened. Mason sent a text message asking her to buy a beautiful new swimsuit instead of an evening gown for the corporate party. He suggested we fly together to the Arab Emirates on New Year's Eve weekend. Getting away for a few days from the hustle and bustle that always accompanies the end of the year sounded delightful. Of course, Jenna replied that she gladly accepted the offer and went to the mall that same day. She wanted to look flawless for Mason on this vacation. Jenna liked to see his rapturous gaze, to hear the compliments she received. So she picked up a beach closet, maximally emphasizing the numerous advantages of her appearance. The girl was sure that not only Mason will admire her on the beach, let her lover see what success his girl enjoys with others. Jenna had read somewhere that it greatly increases the value of the chosen one in the eyes of men. The girl was already anticipating how they would splash in the warm waters of the Persian Gulf and rock out at the local discos, and then rest in the luxurious apartments of the hotel. The trip promised to be wonderful. Jenna tried to behave with restraint, but in the end she could not resist the handsome student from England. He was 3 years younger than her and seemed to have a real crush on the American girl. Although Jenna immediately told him that their romance was purely resort for only a few days. The young man made her feel needed and admirable again, but Jenna realized that neither he nor anyone else could replace Mason. The pre-holiday weekend flew by like a blink of an eye. It was time to go home. Jenna realized that she missed Mason very much and was ready to forgive him anything. Although, of course, as they say, the resentment was gone, but the residue remained. Betty felt like a winner again. They just had a wonderful couple of days at the base, skiing and tubing, walking through the winter forest, roasting meat, drinking spicy mulled wine, playing board games in a big and friendly group. We laughed a lot and talked about interesting topics. Betty listened to a lot of thanks for the fact that she had guessed to bring everyone together and organize this trip. Most importantly, they were together at this time, Betty, Mason, Molly. There was no rushing or hurrying anywhere. Fully enjoying each other's company and hugging and laughing all the time. Betty decided that they needed to do this kind of outing more often. All of this was clearly good for their relationship. At first, Mason seemed anxious and lost. Apparently, he couldn't stop thinking about the lonely Jenna, but then he relaxed, calmed down, and began to enjoy the winter vacation. And the mistress flew to Dubai with a friend. That was wonderful. Betty sincerely hoped that she would meet some rich man there and not return to the USA. Why? Jenna is a blue-eyed blonde, a real beauty, so this option is quite possible. But as much as Betty didn't want it, the problem didn't solve itself. Jenna came back and immediately started texting Mason about how much she missed him. That was okay. Betty wasn't going to give up. Jenna had a favorite little brother. She'd raised him since he was a baby, helping his busy, tired mother. Now David was all grown up, 18 years old. Time has flown by quickly. From a cute, blonde-haired little kid, he turned into a handsome young man. He entered a sports college and was given a dormitory. Charles began his student life, of course. He often came to his sister. She was always happy to invite her relative and even helped him with money. But the young man wanted to earn money himself. "I'm looking for a job," one day he confessed to Jenna. "They promised to take me as a courier in the delivery service. You'll be in the snow and in the cold to travel around the city with a huge box on your shoulders." My sister shook her head. "And get change for it. You don't even have a car, so you should at least drive it. Otherwise, you'll be walking and taking buses." But what can I do? For now, we'll see. Everyone works somehow. Everyone? Jenna frowned. It's different for everyone. And the older sister reminded her brother of a story that had recently happened in their town. A courier, a young girl, brought an order to an apartment and fell into the clutches of drunken guys. The girl miraculously survived the encounter with the scumbags. But it was a girl. I'm a man. David brushed it off. What's the comparison? You think because you're a guy, you're safe? Well, sort of. David smiled. Come on, you're getting a little shady around town. It used to be quieter. All right, I'll talk to someone. Maybe I can get you a job driving for our firm. There's probably plenty of applicants. Your salaries are good. Yes, there are a lot of applicants. Agreed Jenna. But not every one of them has a sister working in the personnel department. Of course, the girl immediately wrote to Mason. In their branch, there was indeed a vacancy for a driver to unload materials. As a member of the Human Resources Department, Jenna could not help but know about it. The work is not much, the pay is good. David would be able to combine study and work perfectly and would not need money. Mason replied that he would take care of the matter. Jenna was sure that tomorrow or the day after tomorrow she would register her brother for a vacant position. Betty read the post about the vacancy and wondered. Another request that could be used in the struggle for marital happiness. The mistress would again be left with nothing. The woman suddenly remembered that she had a nephew living in Boston, so she dialed the number of a great aunt, his mother. It turned out that the nephew works at a local factory, works hard, and gets change. The situation was perfect. Betty happily told her aunt about the job opening and promised to talk to her husband. How did you know the Boston branch needed a driver? Mason looked at his wife in surprise. She had just asked him to hire her great-nephew for the job, describing beforehand how important the relationship with those relatives was to her and how she wanted to help them. I happened to run into Kathy, your boss's wife, at the mall. Mason wondered how bad the timing of all this was. After all, he'd promised a spot to Jenna's brother. She's gonna be upset again, but we already found someone. Mason, I called Human Resources. The position is still vacant. Say no to that person. Say it's taken. Do you have any idea what my aunt did for me? I just have to pay her back. A good job for her son is what's needed. Oh, please, for my sake. Mason heartily texted Jenna to tell her that he couldn't take her brother's job. Of course, the girl was upset. Resentment squeezed her heart. She even threw a plate on the floor in a fit of anger. Again, she was sidetracked. And the next day, the new driver added fuel to the fire. A radiant young man came to apply for a job. He happily shared that he had been told about the position by his great-aunt from New York, the wife of the Boston branch manager Mason. So once again, Betty, without realizing it herself, had screwed things up. Jenna felt herself slowly beginning to hate the woman. She was the reason Mason repeatedly rejected her requests, and he was becoming more and more frustrating. It seemed that Mason was gradually burning out. Their protracted relationship was becoming more and more like a habit. Jenna was very sad to realize it, because the girl still wanted to be near him, to hear his voice, to see attentive gray eyes, and yet the girl realized more and more clearly that their romance would lead to nothing. She had realized it from the beginning, but then passion overshadowed all rational thoughts. Jenna felt herself next to Mason exceptional and unique. He seemed willing to do anything for her. Mason really did a lot for Jenna, but lately his attention was clearly not enough for her. He was always dealing with family problems, working a lot. It was so humiliating to be on the sidelines, especially with so many available men around who would be happy to be near her. Come visit me this weekend. I miss you so much, asked Jenna. Mason hadn't been in Boston in over a month. Baby, I can't. There's a lot of work at the head office. Maybe it's the wife again. Mason sighed. He must have loved Jenna in his own way. He sure did. Why else couldn't he break off a relationship that had grown too serious? He liked a lot of things about her. Good looks, determination, wisdom. Despite her youth, Jenna was remarkably adequate. She never threw tantrums, never drove him crazy. Mason was sure that she would not get pregnant in order to marry him, and would not call Betty with offers to leave her husband. But lately, Jenna has been a little too jealous of his wife. Yes, indeed, there have been several incidents in which Mason has shown that family is more important to him than anything else, but he's never hidden that from Jenna. He admitted on their first date that he wasn't single, and several times during their time together, the man was ready to let her go when she wanted to leave. But Jenna had always come back, and Mason had been genuinely happy about it. He'd probably gotten used to having her around by now. Beautiful, in love, not too demanding, understanding. It was a shame that her behavior was changing. But maybe it's just some crisis in the relationship. It's necessary to be patient a little, and everything will be back to normal. Jenna sat with a glass of champagne in a bubble bath. Being a village girl from a poor family, she never dreamed of such a life. A high-paying job, luxurious interiors, her own small business, a beautiful car, and a man she loved. True, things were not so smooth with the man. He belonged to another, and lately it was indicated more and more often and more vividly. Just at one moment, everything went wrong, as if someone upstairs decided that Jenna had enough personal happiness. Mason's not coming again, citing work, but it's probably all about family. I wonder if she needed help. Would he give up his wife, his kid, his office to support her? I'd have to see if he'd lie. But it's a test, and the future of their relationship depends on how Mason reacts. If he drops everything and flies to her, they'll be together. No. Jenna will pack her things and go to her mother's village for a few months, quit her job. Mason will be there. The business will be entrusted to Christina for the time being. She's her right-hand woman now. Her friend's in the loop. She'll be fine without her. And Jenna will get over her illness, cry and go back to being free. But that's plan B. The girl still hoped Mason would rush to her like he used to. Maybe in time he would even leave his wife, and they would build a family of their own. The phone clicked with a special beep, meaning Mason had a message from Jenna. Betty quickly read it. Okay, that makes sense. New request. The mistress is complaining to her husband about feeling awful vascular problems and wild headaches. I can't do anything. Probably have to go to the hospital. I need help with my business and personal support from my loved one. Betty thought about it. Her intuition told her it was a lie. Jenna is a young girl in the prime of life. The woman had seen the recent pictures she had sent her husband on a regular basis. In them, Jenna was strikingly fresh. Clean, radiant skin, light blush, bright eyes. Looking at the pictures, Betty thought that youth was still beautiful in itself. The girl clearly didn't look sick. Of course, all sorts of things happen. Her hypertensive crisis came on suddenly. But even if Jenna was really sick, let her heal herself. She was not a little girl. Mason took her to a high-paying position, helped her to establish a business, so the money for treatment at Madam clearly has, and care and attention let and demand from close relatives. No, Betty will not let her husband go to Boston anytime soon. Except that she has to come up with a reason, but she'll manage. Lately, Betty felt like she was just a generator of ideas. It didn't take long to think of one. When Betty was picking up her daughter from figure skating practice, she noticed a colorful poster on the wall of the sports center. A grand performance of the section's pupils at the big stadium was planned. The show promised to be bright and colorful. Betty approached Coach Molly. "Hello, why isn't my daughter in the show?" "Molly's not ready yet. She has great prospects. Next year she will definitely show herself, but right now. Perhaps she needs extra lessons? I'm ready to pay for them. as long as my daughter gets to this concert. You see, we have elderly relatives visiting us. This may be the last time they come to New York. If they could see Molly, it would make them happy. I understand, but does your section need new equipment? If you put Molly on the program, I'll get it for you. All right. With apparent reluctance, the coach agreed. Only Molly will have a cameo. She is still small, and it doesn't matter. Betty shined. The main thing is that Molly will perform. At dinner, Mason said that the day after tomorrow, he would be flying to Boston to solve some work issues. Couldn't the business trip be rescheduled? Betty pretended to be surprised and upset by the news. Why? Something urgent again? I wanted to tell you such happy news. Our Molly has been accepted to perform at the Ice Palace. She's the smallest person in the show. Can you believe it? Mason looked proudly at his daughter sitting next to him. You're doing great. You're the star of the ice. Yes. Molly lowered her eyes modestly. I'm good. I've worked so hard, and now I'm going to perform. You're coming to watch, right, Daddy? Mason looked into his daughter's hopeful eyes. The man's choice was obvious. Jenna would soon receive another rejection. Another Betty-directed situation that should contribute to the destruction of the relationship, mistress and husband. Jenna was packing her things. She did not want to leave her apartment, which for 4 years had become almost native, but the girl was determined. This time she is definitely leaving Mason. He has shown her time and time again that family is more important to him. Jenna will always be in second place for him, even perhaps in third place. Then there's the job she adores. She's already bought the train tickets at the office. She herself has drawn up an order for her dismissal. The story's over. Jenna realized that she wanted to be the only one for her man. Perhaps it was time to start a family of her own. Christina recently got married and is now expecting a son. Looking at the family happiness, friends, Jenna realized that she dreams of the same, but a husband and a child. All of this is unthinkable while she's in a relationship with Mason. It was time to put a stop to it. Jenna no longer resented Mason, only the pain of knowing he loved another woman. The man had done so much for her, the girl felt grateful to him, and she would be sure to tell him that to his face or over the phone. But later, not now. Now it is necessary to wait it out, to get over it, to hide for a while. And then a new life would begin. Mason watched Molly's performance. He had come to the Ice Palace with a tricked-out professional camera. Betty watched as he tried to catch his daughter in the frame, not often succeeding. Just as the coach had warned, Molly flashed in the back rows, but the proud father didn't seem to notice. His eyes burned with genuine admiration for his child. Next to him lay a bouquet of roses prepared for the little star. Then the phone beeped again, the same beep that had alerted him to messages from Jenna. Mason didn't pay attention to the sound. He was completely absorbed in his daughter's performance, and Betty, of course, immediately read the text message and smiled victoriously. Jenna asked him not to look for her. She said it was over between them. She even quit her job at the Mason branch so she wouldn't have to see him. Sounds like a win to me. Although, of course, it's too soon to relax. Mason, back in his empty Boston apartment, felt an acute sense of guilt. Taken 4 years of Jenna's life. She could have met her destiny, gotten married, had children instead of wasting her youth on a futile relationship. His conscience was soothed only by the fact that he still helped this girl to establish a business and become financially independent. But the sadness and regret that he and Jenna were not together now, strangely enough, was not there. On the contrary, the man even felt relieved. Now he wouldn't have to flit between his wife and his mistress, trying to pay attention to both. There would no longer be that oppressive feeling of guilt in front of Jenna and Betty. The situation had resolved itself. Lucky. Betty was celebrating the victory with her best friend Kelly. The women were sitting at a pizza place near their office. It was lunch hour. Good for you. Kelly praised the woman. She overcame her resentment, was able to forgive the man she loved, and kept her family together. She pulled it off so masterfully, and it's like she had nothing to do with it. Yes, I'm a strategist, it turns out. Betty agreed. Mason, I think, has come to value family even more. At least he's trying to make time for us. But, Mason's already had an affair. I don't want to scare you, but it's almost certain to happen again if he's capable of it. What are you gonna do then? Well, Betty set her glass down on the table. A cold determination appeared in her gaze. Well, in that case, I already know exactly what to do.